No. Good evening. We'll get our meeting started. Members of the public are encouraged to participate in meetings by one accessing the webcast at www.cityofclovis.com/agendas, providing written comments at the same website, participating by phone, or coming to the City Council meeting in person. I'll call this meeting to order, and the flag salute will be led by our Council Member Messenger.
Please join me in saluting our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
See, our clerk isn't present, but Rebecca is. Rebecca, will you call this roll? Oh, Andy's going to do it?
I'm going to be covering this evening, Mayor. Councilmember Ashbeck?
Here.
Councilmember Messenger?
Here.
Councilmember Wanatua?
Here.
Councilmember Muelan?
Here.
And Mayor Flores.
And I'm here. First order of business will be presentations and proclamations. The first presentation are certificates of recognition to students receiving the American Legion Boys and Girls State Awards. And who will be presenting? Okay, here we go. You'll have to turn that mic on.
There we go. Thank you for having us. I'm Alan Fry, representing the American Legion, and we have Gloria Sinopoli, second row, representing the Ladies Auxiliary. And we have a program that is called Boys State. The American Legion has Boys State, and the Ladies Auxiliary have Girls State, where we send students to Sacramento for a week to learn about government. So they spend a week up in Sacramento forming, actually, governments. They spend the time forming governments and so on, city, county, and state. And we actually have a national program where they go back to Washington, D.C. We send one or two from the state to go back to the national. So you've agreed to honor these students with a proclamation. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn it over to two students. I'm going to have first one of the Boy States representative come up and talk about his experience, and then I'll have one of the Girl States come up and talk about their experience. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Ethan? Oh, there you are.
Well, my experience at Boys State was, it was interesting, but I had a good time. Oh, what a good-looking crowd of people out there. But,
You're going to be a great politician. What a crowd. That's how you start.
oh,
Nice job.
thank you. But seriously, learning about the government for a week, at least my introduction to the government, was a great step. And learning about the Constitution and how governments form and the Supreme Court was very enjoyable. And I like to end with an instance that happened. Someone in my city, of course there's city, county, and state government, someone in my city decided to scam people with their digital money at the event. And that went to the county court, and we lost. But it was a lesson learned. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Laura Hugh, and hi, I'm Mia Fuji, and we both decided to come up to talk about Girl State because we were kind of intertwined even though we weren't in the same city the whole time, and I think I can speak for a lot of us at Girl State when we say that this kind of healed our relationship kind of with the world, I would say, because after online school coming into junior year, it was kind of a big transition into, I guess, the real world again, and I kind of made a joke to my dad before I came here because the rigor that goes into the selective process of who goes to Girls State is, like I said, very rigorous, and so I told my dad, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to come here to make friends or enemies, and by the time I think both Mia and I had very tearful goodbyes to say to these people because they were some of the best people I have ever surrounded myself with. And I'll let Mia talk about her experience. My experience was similar to Laura's experience as well. Coming in, I did not know what to expect. I was kind of freaking out because I was like, there's going to be so many talented young girls. I don't know if I can fit in. But I was able to find my voice as the superintendent of schools for my county, and I was very grateful because all the girls were super supportive of one another, and it was really fun because we were directly involved in politics. We got to make our own ideals, we got to develop our own government, and we got to make a lot of connections too, meeting so many amazing people from all over the state. It was really fun, and Lauren and I, we got the privilege to be in this quartet together and play the national anthem, so that was also really fun. So we had an amazing, memorable experience, and we're forever grateful to everyone who made this possible for us. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to call up all the students, but before that, I want to thank the American Legion for sponsoring this great event, because this is how our youth learns about what it is to become a future leader, and then hopefully some of these young kids will one day aspire to be one of us or even higher in county government, state government, even federal government, because God knows we need leadership, and our country needs people that can steward it into the future. So it looks good, though. That's the promise of this kind of program. So we'll call the students up. Eknor Gill from Grove State. Huh? Well, we can do that. Why don't you stay right here? Mia Fuji. Laura Hugh. Claire Lucas. Claire is not here. She's not here? Oh, okay. Ethan Sayer. Karan Vikram. Nathan Rush. What we want to do is take a photo with you. If you guys spread right here in front of us, we'll take a photo, and then we'll invite you to be up here in the dais, and we'll remove ourselves and let you sit where we sit.
Give you a future glimpse of Clovis leadership.
One of you is going to have to be the city manager.
Or you could be a city attorney.
Or the city attorney.
Come on up.
Come on up.
And you can take another photo.
You guys can take a photo up there. No one wants to be an attorney.
Parents, time for a photo.
That's support.
Someone needs to get...
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
I would love to hear from any of our girls or boys state participants. What did you learn about local government? Like, give us one idea to make local government better. Anybody have one? Would it superintendent of schools, Ethan, or anyone? What did you learn about local government? Yeah. Exactly. Well said. Exactly. Yeah. I learned that so many young girls have so many like amazing ideas. So I think getting youth more involved in having like city council meetings where high schoolers discuss some of those ideas because so many talented like amazing ideas. It's not uncommon for cities to have youth councils, so I think maybe we just have the makings of our first youth council. Mr. Fry, if you'll share your girls and boys states participants, yeah, well done. Ethan or anybody else want anything else?
I learned that city government impacts us more than
It does indeed. That's awesome. Thanks for just chiming in. Appreciate it. Thanks, Jim.
Our next presentation is by the Fresno County Economic Development Corporation on services provided to the city of Clovis.
Well, good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Sherry Neal. I am the Chief Operating Officer for the Fresno County Economic Development Corporation. With me on this evening, I have half of our staff, and on behalf of our President and CEO, we would like to thank you for the opportunity to present to you about who the EDC is, the services that we provide, and some of the exciting things that we have on the horizon coming very, very soon. So next slide, Andy. So a little bit about the EDC. More than 40 years ago, we were established to provide business resources and support to the local business community. And what started as a staff of 5 individuals in 1981 has now grown to a staff of more than 20, and is growing, is still growing. Our organization is governed by a 40-member board of directors. Next slide, Andy. You might notice that handsome vice chair of ours, Andy Hausler, who serves as our vice chair. But our board of directors are representatives from many different sectors, from education to government to nonprofit, workforce development. Next slide, Andy. Workforce development, as well as chambers of commerce and also nonprofits. Next slide. This is our administration team. It's made up of myself, Leanne Eager, our president and CEO, who sends her regards, but she is traveling on business this evening. Our controller, Paul, as well as our executive assistant, Merritt Pacini, who keeps us all in line. Next slide. In order for us to provide our core services of business attraction, business expansion, and business retention, as well as workforce development, it's important that we maintain our relationships with all 15 cities within Fresno County. And we do that by, of course, especially with our longstanding partnership with the City of Clovis, we have shared goals where we work with the Economic Development Department to find out what goals the City of Clovis has and how the EDC can assist in achieving those goals. We have monthly meetings with the City of Clovis where we discuss our wins for the month, but also what challenges and concerns we may be facing, as well as representing the City of Clovis at broker mixers, client requests, responding to those client requests, and representing the City of Clovis at trade shows and missions. Next slide. So at this time, I'll turn it over into the hands of Tiffany Luke, our Business Attraction Specialist.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. As Sherry mentioned, my name is Tiffany Luke. I am the Business Attraction Specialist for Fresno EDC. With my colleague Julian Ramos, the Client Services Manager, together we make up the Business Attractions Department. So our department facilitates site selection and marketing for leads that we receive from partners, the state, and other organizations. Next slide, Andy. Or previous slide. You already got it. Thank you. We also conduct proactive outreach. For example, what you see on the screen, you can see an example of the marketing packet that we tailored to wholesalers as part of our healthcare proactive outreach. Working in partnership with city staff, especially Andy Hausler, our special projects team looked at comparable cities and metros, evaluated subsectors ideal for Clovis healthcare growth, analyzed companies' 10Ks, annual reports, priorities, and growth projections, and finally assembled a list of hundreds of different healthcare companies in the wholesale and manufacturing sectors. Julian and myself narrowed that list down to 20 companies, 10 each wholesale and manufacturing, and created personalized marketing packets such as that which you see on the screen. And our outreach has already resulted in us sending that packet to several such companies. When we look forward to continuing to follow up on this project and growing the healthcare industry cluster in Clovis. Next slide. Often in the site selection process, availability dictates the sites that we can offer to clients. On this screen, we're highlighting the Clovis vacancy rate. As you're well aware, rates across all sectors are at or near 5-year lows. One way to address that is with plans such as that which is already in motion to incorporate 1,000 acres into the city's sphere of influence. This will result in many opportunities to spur growth, jobs, and development. We've had several types of users interested in larger spaces in Clovis, and we're hoping to bring those that fit to the city. With that, I'll introduce my colleague Miguel Ruelas to discuss the work that the BEAR team has been doing.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council members. My name is Miguel Ruelas. I'm the Business Expansion and Retention Coordinator with Fresno EDC. I work with 2 departments, which is a retention department, who consists of Marcela Lara and Darian Galindo. Marcela, who is here today, and then also with the Economic Development team, who we have Charlene Holguin and Jackie Cuevas. Next slide, please. So what we do, we primarily focus on businesses locally here in Clovis. So we build the relationships with those businesses and find out where they're at in the lifespan of their business, and connect them to the available resources and incentives that may be suitable at the moment. Within the past 3 years, obviously there was, a change in the world that happened, and so we're able to connect them with what was available to them to keep them alive by using the resources that were available. And in doing so, for the businesses in Clovis in the last 3 years, we're able to get $1.26 million in direct funding for local businesses here in Clovis. Next slide, please. What we've also found is what we're hearing nationwide. There's a shortage of employees. Help wanted signs are everywhere. And so we connect them with the training programs that we have available. We currently have a partnership with the Department of Social Services that provides the Valley Apprenticeship Connection, which is an introduction to construction, as well as a truck driver training program, who gets those on welfare to Class A license and on the road, making a better living for themselves, which you might have seen on the news not too long ago as we did a ribbon cutting with JD Food. But additionally to that, we have the Central Valley Training Center, which is a partnership with the High-Speed Rail. Again, an introduction to construction and trades. Next slide, please. So those workforce were federally recognized by the Economic Development Administration, which was then given us an award of $23 million to expand on those workforce training projects. And that's what we're kind of working towards now in the future, and particularly for just opening up for more than just those in receiving aid from the Department of Social Services. We'll go a little bit more about that later on in the presentation. But with that, I want to leave you to Will Oliver, our VP of Business Services.
Great. Thank you, Miguel. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and council members. Will Oliver, Vice President of Business Services with the EDC and former Boise State alumni. Next slide, please. Actually, yeah, my bad, Andy. One more back, sorry. Pleased to introduce our Special Projects and Initiatives team, which consists of Chris Zeitz, who is not here this evening, Spencer Bremer, who's standing behind me, and Ross Williams. One of the biggest changes of the EDC since our founding, and really as of late, is the investment and resources that we have committed around statistical analysis and data. These are our brains of the operation. They help guide our day-to-day activities. I will also add that Spencer and Ross are proud Fresno State alumni, and Chris was a professor of econometrics, and so he was able to use that front row seat into some of the best talent at Fresno State, and we're very lucky to have them on our team. Next slide, Andy. So before, we would often have to rely on very costly consultants for analyses, whether it be a leakage report, which shows the retail gaps that exist in the community, or to conduct, basic economic or impact analysis. With the team behind me, we're able to do a lot of that in-house now, able to curate a lot of services both for the private sector as well as for our cities to help generate meaningful insights that can drive our programs and also provide value to each of our members. One of those examples, too, is incentive calculators. So one of the primary incentive tool in the state of California is California Competes. This is a great program for companies that have job demands or looking to locate here and have out-of-state options. We're able to, with quite a bit of specificity, estimate what that company can land in terms of tax credits based on past performance, the types of jobs, wages, et cetera. So that's one tool of many. Next slide, please. But I think one of the areas that we've become so excited about is really how we can lend these expertise in impact evaluation and being able to identify other ways to promote our region for aspects beyond just low cost. I'm going to be completely honest with you, and as an economic development organization, it gets exhausting at times to have to continually compete against low-cost factors. We know that it's important for the business model, but oftentimes it can be seen as a race to the bottom. So what we've been working on the past several years is the aspect of an impact evaluation framework where we're not only just being judged by site selectors and consultants who dictate the game, but we can also evaluate companies based on a set of factors or a rubric that's city-driven as well as resident-driven. And so since 2019, we have been working on an initiative called Fresno's Impact Economy, which looks for different ways to allocate incentives or perhaps to issue contracts away from just mere job creation, but living wages, environmental impact, water conservation, and things of that sort. We've had a phenomenal partnership with the Harvard Business School, taking some of their leading methodologies and adapting that in a very community-based scenario. So that's one example I wanted to share about our Special Projects and Initiatives team, how we're trying to meet the needs of our communities today, but also looking towards the future of where economic development could be, particularly for Fresno County and for Clovis in the future. And obviously, this is not lost on you all. I think the city of Clovis leads the example in terms of promoting quality of life and its rich assets when it comes to economic development. So I think that will do it for the presentation. We're available for any questions. One thing I do want to add, real briefly, and Miguel mentioned Good Jobs Challenge grant that we did receive by the EDA. I just want to provide a really brief background about that. Last year, the EDA announced two competitive programs, the Build Back Better Challenge and the Good Jobs Challenge, both to meet short-term and long-term hiring and workforce needs in our nation. We worked in partnership with the Community Foundation. They took the lead on Build Back Better. We took the lead on Good Jobs. And we worked collaboratively across the four-county region in Fresno, Madera, Tulare, and Kings to put together a very competitive application that meets the needs for business services, transportation, construction, and manufacturing, some of the larger job generators in the area. Of the 510 applications that were received, the EDC was one of 32 that were awarded. So we're going to use that $23 million to not only create new programs such as in manufacturing, providing short-term boot camp style production line training with the priority of getting people from training on the shop floor, but also scaling existing programs that are best in class, like the EOC's Valley Apprenticeship Connections program. We're going to help fund that and make it available to rural residents. There's a handful of others providing childcare, translation services, transportation, you name it. But I just wanted to share that a little bit and thank the Clovis employers that helped us in that as well as the city. We had, again, a very regional competitive application, and we could not do that without that commitment and that buy-in. So I just want to provide a little bit of information about Good Jobs, and again, we're happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Questions, Ben?
Will and Sherry and team, thank you for being here. A question, and congratulations on the EDA award. A question that spans my day job and my night job. It's curious that in your, what'd you just call it? Good job, what did you call it?
Good Jobs Challenge.
That, my memory was like 3 seconds ago you said that. You didn't focus on healthcare. And as you just referenced Clovis is the medical neighborhood, the medical capital of San Joaquin Valley, yes. And the workforce shortages, getting under-skilled, underemployed folks into a pipeline for medical occupations, and our gap is so gigantic. Yeah. Just curious about how that didn't make the radar. You're welcome.
That's a great question. I was anticipating that question, and it was one that we wrestled with quite a bit during the process. First, let me add, we had over 100 meetings with organizations, folks in healthcare, manufacturing, and the construction trades.
They obviously didn't talk loud enough. Should have invited me to talk more. They
did. Certainly the job demands are there, and quite frankly, this was a very competitive process, and there was also an 8-county consortium of agencies that were putting together a Good Jobs proposal focused on the healthcare sector. So we wanted to make sure that we were both equally competitive. We thought that we would probably jeopardize each other's efforts if we had duplication in those proposals, and quite frankly, we would have liked to have seen their proposal awarded as well as ours. So that's the primary reason in the short term why. I will say, though, the network and the supports that are going into this grant is absolutely generalizable to other sectors. So our goal is to not just be siloed and focused in terms of one sector or the other. We're going to bring in best-in-class software and tools to meet people where they are, to provide an on-ramp and menu of training options, which could be in the healthcare sector as well. And I can't speak for Leanne, I can't speak for our partners, but we're going to be in the design phase over the next 6 months. So if there are validated, training programs, which we know exist today, we could probably provide that as an offering to our residents that want to take part. But that's in part the reason why there wasn't a singular focus on it.
I just think for Clovis to achieve our economic development goals, it's going to require a healthcare workforce that's sustainable. So in the EDC relationship with the city,
absolutely,
Mr. Vice Chair, I would just weigh in that healthcare sector for this part of the valley is essential. So whatever opportunities are ahead, healthcare is critical for a whole bunch of reasons, but for our economic development goals, really, really important as a city.
Yep. Nope.
Thanks. Thanks for all you've done. I know you can't have all these sectors, but
sure.
I just couldn't resist the question.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Will.
Anyone else?
Yeah.
Juan?
Sure, good to see you again. I wanted to plant this seed into the EDC because I think I'm speaking on behalf of elected official on the city looking out for economic development. I think the EDC needs to start to weigh in our commercial development impact fees, because at the bottom line, a business comes in if they can afford it or not. And I think as electeds, we need also your weigh-in, because the BIA weighs in on our development impact fees on housing, but we need, you know, another eye to just look at that and go, this is what we're seeing within Fresno County, this is how it weighs in. Clovis, you're considering a raise or a decrease, this is how it would impact, because I think we don't get enough analysis from a neutral party like yours to give us insight. And I always bring that up when we talk about it, because commercial development really generates the most sustainable income to the city, you can say, instead of a home itself. And so how do we help with what you're doing with our impact fees to attract that? And so I don't know if that's something you guys can start to look at to help the whole region as well. And then I also understand that transportation is big, and I think Leanne has a position that is attracting. How will that help the region, and how is that weigh in the work that you do and to help cities like ours?
Well, big time. Obviously, it's an amazing time and opportunity for Leanne to have the position as chair of the California Transportation Commission. She's definitely helped elevate our region, bring a lot of visibility to our efforts that, unfortunately, throughout the state, I think too often go overlooked and unnoticed. And so she's, I know, advocating every single day for our cities. I'll just say in terms of the transportation sector, it has an outsized role on our regional economy. You know, it's in part the reason why we carved out, you know, a specific sector strategy and good jobs. We know that in terms of truck drivers, I mean, we have a job demand of 5,000 positions locally that need to be filled. As McGill mentioned, we just announced our new location at JD Food for our John Lawson Truck Drivers Training Program. One thing that this grant funding through the EDA is going to do is double that program so that we make seats available not just for folks at the Department of Social Services, which that's absolutely critical and important, but to residents throughout the valley that are looking to partake. And the interest is there too. Since that announcement, we had over 100 phone calls into the EDC wanting to take part of that program, some wanting to pay their own freight, and one even from Guatemala, which was surprising. So transportation is important. I'll also say too, is it runs a gamut in terms of the types of careers that can be skilled, and from entry-level opportunities, from truck maintenance mechanics to, you know, logistics and distribution, to managers and other skilled positions. It also represents the future of you know, our renewable energy efforts. So in our grant, we've also included funding to look at how we can upskill truck maintenance mechanics that need to be trained in clean or electric heavy trucks, which we know are coming. If you talk to industry today, they're planning for it. They're looking at how they can upsize their own facilities for it. So transportation has an outsized role in our economy, and it's going to be a big part of our programs, and particularly with the Good Jobs Challenge as well.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for coming here and giving us a great presentation. We appreciate it. Next item is public comments. There's the opportunity for the members of the public to address the City Council on any matter within the City Council's jurisdiction that is not listed on the agenda. In order for everyone to be heard, please limit your comments to 5 minutes or less, or 10 minutes per topic. Anyone wishing to be placed on the agenda for a specific topic should contact the city manager's office and submit correspondence at least 10 days before the desired date of appearance. Next item, ordinance and resolutions. With respect to the approval of resolutions or ordinances, the reading of the title shall be deemed a motion to waive a reading of the complete resolution or ordinance, and unless there's a request by a council member that the resolution or ordinance be read in full, further reading of the resolution or ordinance shall be deemed waived by unanimous consent of the council. Consent calendar. Items considered routine in nature are to be placed upon the consent calendar. They will all be considered and voted upon in one vote as one item unless a council member requests individual consideration. A council member's vote in favor of the consent calendar is considered and recorded as a separate affirmative vote in favor of each action listed. Motions in favor of adoption of a consent calendar are deemed to include a motion to waive the reading of any ordinance or resolution on the consent calendar. For adoption of ordinances, only those that have received a unanimous vote upon introduction are considered consent items. Does council want to pull any item on the consent calendar? No. I've been asked by staff to pull item 16 from the consent calendar. Nothing else from council? Anyone in the public wishing to pull an item from the consent calendar? Okay.
I'll move that we approve the consent calendars, items 3 through 15, with the exception of item 16.
Second. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. And we'll hear item 16. Mike?
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. With the approval of tract map 5122, located east of Temperance Avenue and south of Shepherd Avenue, a temporary access was constructed on a lot at the Carson Avenue alignment to provide temporary secondary point of access for the subdivision. At such a time, the access was no longer to be needed. The street improvements were to be removed and the lot developed with a single-family home. Staff has recently evaluated the continued need for the access and has determined it's beneficial for the city to acquire the property and have it remain open as a point of access onto Shepherd Avenue for public safety purposes and improved emergency response for the subdivision in the area. Staff polled the neighborhood and had 55 responses representing 44 homes. 35 were in support of the access remaining, and 9 were in favor of its elimination. One of the property owners in favor of eliminating the access, that's Andrea Pena, called staff and stated she had been promised it would be eliminated, and that's why she purchased her home originally. She is worried about crime due to the access and doesn't believe response times would be improved. Staff wanted to make sure council heard her concerns because she wasn't able to make it tonight, but she's also submitted an email that I believe council has. Staff has negotiated with the property owner to acquire, to allow the access to remain at a price of $205,316.83. With escrow fees, it's a little over $207,000, and staff is proposing with the attached budget amendment to acquire the property with general fund, half Measure C funds. Staff is requesting authorization for the city manager to enter into a purchase agreement with the intent for the access to remain and approval of the budget amendment as presented in the attached resolution. This concludes staff's report. Thank you.
Questions for staff?
Could you just say, I can't remember can you say the vote, if you will, the neighbors that weighed in, what was that again? Yeah, there was a total of 55 responses representing about 44 homes, and 35 were in support of the access remaining, and 9 were in favor of its elimination. And that 9 didn't include Ms. Pena, I assume? It did include. It did. Yeah. So she's just sort of restating her original concerns. Correct. Yeah, okay, thanks.
Anybody else?
And our fire and police are supportive of this access continuing to be open because, that is an area that has less access because Harlan Ranch only has a couple entry points. So this is something that is beneficial to our services, to that neighborhood especially.
I'll take that one if you don't mind. So I'm the one who kind of brought this forward. So for poor PDS staff, I'm the troublemaker. So I'll take the answer for it.
That's not new.
I know. So basically, we have good intentions as we start to lay out, but as developers purchase certain pieces of property, there's not access, the access ways change and stuff. So what this will leave us with is just an entrance on Temperance and one all the way over onto Wolf. And it's over almost 3/4 of a mile to get all the way up to the top where we close it off back to the end of the cul-de-sac. Remember, we don't have the ability to drive faster than 25 miles an hour, even with our lights and sirens in residential neighborhoods. We must follow the residential because kids could get coming out between cars and stuff, even with us with an emergency situation. So that added piece will take over a minute and a half, almost 2 minutes just to get into where they are from once we leave Temperance. So that's what enables us to go up to the top. We can actually do greater than 45, 50 miles an hour, come into the top off of Shepherd, come back in there and service it. So you're looking at well over 50 miles an hour to 25 miles an hour for that last mile. That's a big difference to where we are, and the ability to access, and when we look at quarter sections, what's made us very successful. And if you remember our quarter section maps we put in our annual report, the ones that have the entrances on all four sides turn green. The ones that don't are the ones that are yellow and red in color. So we would like to be able to keep that entrance. It's fully improved. It's made sense. It's worked well for over the last 15 years, and it makes sense to our response times.
Thank you for that, Chief. And I appreciate the staff reaching out to the residents. I think that's one of the concerns that the council had, and for taking the time to reach a good majority of them, if not all, the homes that are there. So thank you for that.
Okay. I'll open it up to the public. Anyone in the public wishing to comment on consent item 16? Anyone on the web?
No.
I'll bring it back to the council.
I'll make a motion that we approve consent item 16, and maybe with just a direction to our police department to pay a little extra attention out there, see if their crime stats match this. I got to say, the Nextdoor app reporting strange people hanging around is everywhere. So if that were the case, every neighborhood would be at risk. So, but maybe PD could pay a little bit of attention just to see what the lay of the land is out there, and to put Ms. Pena's mind at ease that we hear her, and we'll watch for that. But I think we've already moved on with this item. So I'll make that motion that we approve item number 16.
I'd like to second it with a comment. I don't believe that, I understand the concerns of the people up there, but if we were to close this off, it would push traffic down into other parts of the neighborhoods, and those people have not been surveyed. It would force traffic on the Powers and Locan, and we already have problems with speed now, and I think it would be dangerous to do this. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. So the motion carries 5-0. Next items will be public hearings. A public hearing is an open consideration within a regular or special meeting of the City Council for which special notice has been given and may be required. When a public hearing is continued, noticing of the adjourned item is required by Government Code 54,955.1. Staff has requested that we move items 19 and 20 for consideration before we hear the 17 and 18. So
the justification for that is going to be 19 and 20 are being recommended for continuation to next week's meeting. We have people in the audience that we could have out of here sooner than later.
So it should expedite our meeting. The council okay with that? Okay, so we'll hear items 19 and 20 first. Item 19 is considered item associated with approximately 310 acres of land bound by Leonard Avenue on the west, Thompson Avenue on the east, Gettysburg Avenue on the north, and Ashland Avenue on the south. The Home Place Holding LLC applicant, Four Creeks Incorporated representatives, Sari M. Miller, trustee, and Sari M. Miller Revocable Trust, dated November 27, 2001, et al., owner to be continued September 19th. And, excuse me, I'll read, well, we'll take that one up first. Are they related?
19 and 20 are related, but they're separate actions, so I'd appreciate a
Okay.
motion on 19 and a motion on 20.
So we'll do 19 first. Go ahead. Staff for this one is David Merchant, our city planner.
And staff is just recommending this item be continued to next week.
Okay.
People that came to talk, do we open the public hearing?
So any questions of staff by council? No? Did anyone come to speak on this item, item 19? Seeing none, anyone on the web?
No.
Okay.
I'll make a motion that we continue this item. Is it still September 19th, which is next week, as opposed to?
That's correct, September 19th.
I'll make a motion that we continue this item to September 19th.
Second. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. So it's 5-0 for approval of the motion. Next is item 20, consider approval of resolution RO 304, a resolution of application for the annexation of the territory known as the Home Place, Gettysburg Leonard's Southeast reorganization encompassing approximately 304 acres of land generally bound by Leonard Avenue on the west, Thompson Avenue on the east, Gettysburg Avenue on the north, and Ashland Avenue on the south. The Home Place Holding LLC applicant, Siri Miller, trustee, and Siri Miller Revocable Trust dated November 27, 2001, et al., owner to be continued September 19th. Same?
Yes, correct.
Council have any questions regarding this from staff? Nope. Anyone in the public wishing to comment on this item or came here to comment on the item?
I'll move that we continue this item as well to September 19th.
Nobody on the web?
Nobody on the web, sorry.
That's okay.
Sorry. I figured it was like no one. I'll make the motion.
Second. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. So it's 5-0, the motion carries. We'll continue it to next week. Next item is 17, consider approval of Resolution 22, adoption of the City of Clovis 2021-2022 Consolidation Annual Performance and Evaluation Report, CAPERS, for expenditures of Community Development Block Grant Funds. Our staff member was our Management Analyst, Claudia Cáceres.
Hi, good evening. I'm Claudia Cáceres, Management Analyst over the Affordable Housing Programs for the City of Clovis. Today before you is, like was mentioned, the Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report for the last program year, which runs from July 1st, 2021 to the end of June, this past June in 2022. The procedural steps to be taken to adopt the CAPER is to prepare a report of the previous fiscal year's CDBG performance, which is the grant we received from HUD, in the format that HUD prescribes, and it's attached to the staff report. And then we publish the draft report for public comment for the mandatory minimum 15-day public review period, and that was done in August with an extra week because of the last week's council meeting. And then we hold this public hearing and authorize a resolution adopting the performance report and submittal to HUD. This last year was a little bit slower than other years. I'm going to just preface by saying that. I came on in March, and Andy did a great job doing 3 jobs at once, and I think hopefully I helped. But we were able to utilize staff on hand, train them quickly, and had them do a great job over the fiscal year. So staff was actually able to complete 16 home repair grants along with Habitat for Humanity. And those are $6,000 grants. They're mostly mobile homes, to mobile homes in our area. A handful of them are to our non-mobile home owner-occupied residents. And of course, we also funded our area-based policing program over the year. The allocation was $112,000, and the amount expended was $107,000. There was a great partnership over the year between administration and code enforcement and the area-based policing program. There was 1,700 calls for service in the CDBG area. 455 cases were addressed, and I think most importantly were educational campaigns that our area-based policing staff is undertaking in the area, as well as campaigns to reach out to our CDBG areas for services, not just the policing services, but rehab services and as well as any planning services that needs to get done. Over the year, we also funded the community kitchen, and 19 entrepreneurs were assisted with $50,000 in CDBG funds. A couple of other projects that were being worked on during the year but have not been completed are the Gettysburg, Norwich alleys. It's from 2009 to 2020. It's almost going to bidding. We expect it to go to bid in the next month or so, and it should be completed before the end of the year. And we also have a much larger project, the Dennis, Beverly, Mitchell, San Jose alleys, and for $720,000, and it's about the same status. The design is almost complete, and it should go to bidding pretty soon, and we hope to have it completed within the next year. That's a much larger project. And I just also want to mention that I'm partial to CIP staff, but they are really great in helping me, making sure I get status updates and whatever I need for CDBG going. And in addressing the 5-year goals and our status of getting those met as part of our consolidated plan, last year we made the consolidated plan and we had made 5-year goals. So for housing rehabilitation, we made a 5-year goal of assisting 125 households. It was a slow year, like I mentioned, so we only assisted 16. We are revamping this year. There's going to be many more households helped this year. There's a lot of need, as we all know, and so we're making sure that we address and use all of the funds available for our housing rehab. The CDBG funds, again, the minor rehabilitation is $6,000, but we have a much larger allocation of CalHome, which I'm also implementing this year. We also have a goal for area-based policing, assisting 125,000 persons. The current results are having assisted 25,000 persons, so we're along the way in meeting that goal. The public facilities or infrastructure goal is, again, the alleys, the streets. We have several that we're going to undertake this year, including the Gold Canal this coming year. And so even though we have 0 results right now, when I come to you next year, we hope to present much better numbers. It's one of the projects that got funded. It's at the Gold Canal near Peach. We're going to do some improvements to the park area.
Part of the Master Trails Agreement.
And as part of our business incubator project for the community kitchen, we hope to be able to help an additional 50 businesses. This year we helped 19, so our economic development staff has done a great job this year, and they are hitting the ground running again this year.
Claudia, can I ask you a question?
Yep.
In the business incubation category, do we have in the 5-year horizon any thinking about another kind of business incubator? Like I've tried to convince Bitwise they should have come to Clovis years ago, but that's actually not working out. So, I mean, would you ever see a technology incubator or a community technology sort of center or something along those lines to expand the kitchen idea to some other sector? Do you all, is that in anybody's long-range plan?
So I'll take that one. We have been working with partners on additional incubation. Fresno State, for example, Clovis Community College. It's unlikely that we would be the driving force behind one, but we're partnering with others. Fresno State's even looking at partnering with our food incubator to take it to the next level as far as packaging and those kinds of things. So I think we'll see one in the next few years, but the food incubator is definitely special to us.
It is. I mean, it's very special. We've had such success with that. It would be fun to see if we could replicate it in a different sector, like technology or something along those lines.
Yeah, and it has spurred a lot of conversations.
Yeah, great. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Quick question, Dalia. You know the 4 categories, the actual dollar amounts, is it on the previous slide? Is that where it is?
The previous amount, The previous
For
slide.
each one, you know, how there's 4 and then there's expected numbers? Are the dollars amounts in a different slide?
They're not in any of these slides. These slides are the actual project activity funding amounts. But in general, as an example, the home repair grants of $136,000, it's that times 5.
Okay. Because it's helpful, or it makes it more realistic to see how little we actually do get to try to reach these numbers, because that's what's lost. Because, you know, 50 businesses, it sounds huge, but, you know, an actual dollar next to incubator could just be $100,000, which is, you can only get $500 grants to 50 businesses or something like that. So that reality sometimes gets lost, because in a city like ours, we don't get that much money to help those who really need it. So somehow, I just wanted to, is what I'm saying correct, is what I'm trying to say, because I don't see the dollars next to it, so.
You're correct. The dollars aren't on there, but I could definitely provide that information to you.
Yeah.
But you're correct. The city receives a very small allocation. Staff stretches beyond probably normal people could stretch it to be able to assist as many of our community members as possible.
I have a comment and a question. Our program where we are doing the alley work is really important because when you have an area, especially an alley, that looks like nobody cares about it, that's when you see mattresses and washing machines and graffiti and junk and other trash, and then you have people hanging out. When we fix those things, it does a lot for the neighborhood. It improves the values. It makes it less crime potential. And at some point, as we do our master trails agreement and we start doing our creek banks, we need to consider getting some money out there for people to do fences. If you look at some of the areas where along the Gould Canal, going through the Santa Ana, Minnewawa area, a lot of the houses there, it's probably the original fence. And a lot of them are in disrepair. And if we could help some of those people be able to repair their fences, that would be a boost for the entire neighborhood. So that's something probably in the future we need to look at. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I'm just going to show a couple of pictures of our projects. This is a home rehabilitation grant from last year. It's in a mobile home. The landing into the entrance wasn't accessible. Most of our mobile home owners that participate in our program are elderly. So it's a trip hazard, it's a safety hazard for the owner, and they asked if we could repair, amongst other things in the mobile home, the landing, and that's what the bottom picture shows. And this one's a beautiful repair of the stairs, also a trip hazard and safety hazard for the owner. It's not the same home, it's a different one. And again, like I said, we work with Habitat for Humanity to do the contracting and repairs. Sometimes they do the repairs themselves, and sometimes they contract with the contractor to do the repairs. And in this case, we were able to replace the stairs actually from scratch for this owner. And this is one of my favorite ones because you can't really tell what it is. But this lady's air conditioner, foam cooler wasn't working, and it was dripping. And you can't tell, but it's red right as it goes south downwards on her roof. So her roof was leaking into her house. And so she reaches out to see how we could help her. And instead of patching it up and fixing it up or putting it up in a foam cooler, they got creative, and they actually, I'm going to say this all wrong, even though I used to have one in my house. It's a dual pack, and there was enough room in the closet and door to add an AC unit to her furnace. And so now she has an AC unit instead of a foam cooler. And the roof was replaced where it needed patching. It was actually replaced. And this is another repairing of flooring. It was indoors. The owner had carpet all around the mobile home, and so we were able to replace the carpet with the flooring you see in the picture on the right. And This is a picture from our area-based policing unit. And they do so much work, but amongst the work that they do is making sure that our CDBG areas look nice and clean and well-kept. And so they'll reach out to the commercial owners to ensure that they're cutting their lawns, that they're putting away areas where people come and dump, even though it's not their own trash. They'll work with homeowners to ensure that any sort of trash is put away, cleaned out. Our unit with Dave Rosen and Abby, they're just great and awesome to work with. I'm glad to be a partner with them in reaching out to our owners and our commercial owners and to ensure that those areas look as beautiful as possible. And she does a great job of reaching out to the owners. And our community kitchen with our economic development team is the business incubator part of the project that we have. We have a couple of pictures from our entrepreneurs, the Candyman's Corner, Erin Nielsen who does catering, the brioche lady, and of course our Cute Confections entrepreneur as well. I think we've seen them over the year come in. And that concludes my report. Open still to any questions you may have.
Questions for Claudia?
It's probably not official, but it's just, I took the number of the people that you helped just this year and just divided that as to how many are in the city, and it's 17%. I take the money, the total, 1 million something, and you take that to the budget, it's less than 1% to do the work for 18% of the people in this community. And so amazing work by you, Andy, before then. And however more we can get to help, because the more I think we will just be able to do, you know, even more things for the community, even projects like what Councilmember Bessinger said on trails and fences and all that. And so, you know, we do a great job with streets and lights and all that, but your dollars actually go beyond the curb to reach the home, to give people pride and also hope in where they live. And so that's amazing. Keep up the good work, and hopefully, you know, within 5 years, we'll see that we've exceeded all those goals that we set with the minimal amount of dollars that we received. And
I just want to chime in, staying on the health theme. I had really never thought about it. I've probably seen that report in some variation for 20-some years. But the examples of the improved air conditioning in the home and safer stairways up and the removal of carpet, which is a fall risk for many people to carpet, the impact that the city has on people's health, I don't think we tell that story very often. And so I've been thinking a lot about how do you judge a healthy city, you know, like I'm interested in trying to figure that out, but I think what you described tonight, I don't think I've ever thought about CDBG projects relative to individuals' health. And it's hard to measure whether they would have less asthma or fewer falls or whatever it would be. But anyway, tonight those are 3 really good examples of you didn't just improve their house, you likely improved their health. And that is a price tag, super hard to measure, but probably a story we should think about telling, because I think cities do a lot. You can do parks and trails and all of that and cleanliness and all of that. But this is, to Vong's point, this is in someone's house who probably could never have gotten around to doing the floor or the swamp cooler. So anyway, just really, those were nice, really touching stories about individual health. And I think that is what our role is at some level, keeping Clovis a safe and healthy place to live. So those are really good examples. So thanks, and let's think of more ways to tell that story. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, open it to the public. Anyone in the public wishing to comment on this item? On the web?
No.
Okay. And I'll entertain a motion for adoption.
Motion to adopt the City of Clovis 21-22 Consolidated Annual Performance Capper for Community Development Block Grants.
I'll second that.
A motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0 for approval. Next item will be consider various options regarding the creation of a historic preservation board. But since this item originated with the discussion impacting 325 Pulaski, that has a financial impact on a property that I have a financial interest in, and therefore I think even though it might be a little bit remote, but I'm not taking any chances. I'm going to recuse myself from this discussion. I think I also recused myself back in May from this conversation, and I'll let our Mayor Pro Tem Lynn lead this discussion as I recused myself from the meeting.
Thank you. So I think this is item 18 on the agenda, but it might be item 17 in my packet. So am I confused?
No, that was an additional item that was on the consent calendar.
All right. So in case anyone else is confused. Sorry, I cut you off. Did I cut you off? No. Kind of did though, sorry. All right, so it's item 18 on the agenda. Consider various options regarding the creation of a historic preservation board. Sorry. This item has a couple of options before us. One is to establish a committee that will assess our historic resources and provide recommendations to the council. The second one is to consider an ordinance, or the third option is to take no action. And knowing this group, there could be a fourth action, which is none of the above, or some other option. So with that, staff on this is Andy Hausler, assisted by Renee Mathis. And I've already forgotten your first name, but your last name is Favini. So how could I not remember your first name?
Lori.
Laura. Darn it, that's what I was going to say. Lori.
You forgot it.
I did. Could you say it again? How did I remember Favini? That's not even normal. Lori Favini from Lozano Smith. So with that, I'll turn over to Andy to start it off.
Right, I'll go ahead and kick this off. So Mayor Pro Tem and members of council, tonight we're asking council to consider various options regarding the creation of a historic preservation board. There are three options as described in the agenda item. The first is to establish a temporary committee that would assess historic resources in the city of Clovis and provide recommendations to city council on the protection of those identified resources. Option B is to consider introduction of an ordinance of the council of the city of Clovis, adding chapter 9.81 of Title 9 of the Clovis Municipal Code, creating a historic preservation board, or C, take no action at this time. So a little bit of background on how we got here. On May 2nd, 2022, council received an update on the status of 325 Pulaski Avenue, also known as the Clovis Chamber of Commerce building. On June 6th, 2022, council directed creation of an advisory board as described in the Clovis Muni Code 9.120020. The City Review Board designated to promote the cultural, economic, educational, and general welfare of the city through the preservation and protection of buildings, sites, structures, areas, and districts of a historic significance and interest. The city does not have this review board currently in place, and council asked staff to go back and come back with options on implementing that. Over the past 2 months, staff has developed an ordinance to establish an advisory board. An overview of this will be provided as option B. The staff has also developed another alternative to consider, which is option A, and council can determine to take no action at this time, which is option C, or option D, as Mayor Pro Tem mentioned. So I'm going to cover option A. This would establish a temporary committee, would assess historic resources in the city of Clovis, would be one of their tasks, and then provide recommendations to city council on historic resources to consider protecting. They would then provide recommendations on methods and tools to protect identified resources. So the goal for this body would be to come back to council with a list of potential historic resources in our community and with some tools they recommend council to implement to protect those. With that, I'm going to turn it over to the city attorney's office, Lori, to go over the ordinance, and in more detail, Renee Mathis will follow her.
Good evening, Lori Cavini with Lozano Smith. Thank you for having me this evening. We began with goals as provided by the council to create an advisory board to the Planning Commission and to the City Council. This board would be tasked with creating an initial list of historic landmarks and historic sites. The advisory board would be in charge of maintaining that list of historic landmarks and historic sites as well. In developing the draft ordinance, we reviewed policies of other cities and consulted various guidebooks and resources, including a resource by the State Department of Historic Preservation. We also developed a team to create and review the ordinance with myself and various members of staff. The board, as I stated, would be an advisory board to the Planning Commission. It would be and City Council. It would be composed of 5 members who would be residents of the City of Clovis and appointed by the City Council to 4-year terms, and they would meet on a monthly basis. The initial focus would be the 1 square mile of Clovis, and it would be limited to non-residential structures. The duties of the board would include recommending an initial list of historic sites within that defined historic district. The board would also recommend guidelines to the Planning Commission and the City Council for consideration of designation of historic sites. The board would conduct an annual review of the historic sites register, recommend standards to be used in reviewing permits and applications to modify any historic sites, and review and recommend actions and permits and applications to modify historic sites, and other duties as may be specified by the City Council. And with that, I will turn it over to Renee.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and City Council members. So in addition to the board composition and duties that Lori outlined under option B, the ordinance as currently drafted also outlines the approval procedures for the designated sites, so the permits and the applications that would be required. I'm presenting on the draft language because a lot of those approvals generate out of PDS. So the historic site modification approval procedures really has 3 main triggers. The first trigger, starting with the least invasive to the most, would be ordinary maintenance and repair. That would be no change in design. There would be no material or exterior appearance changes at all. No approvals would be required. So they wouldn't be required to get a permit, apply for an application, or have any kind of approval under the proposed options. The next trigger would be exterior modifications that would not require a building permit, but an application would be required. An example could be a color change or some kind of exterior appearance. Just for note, currently, these types of modifications don't require any kind of approval process from PDS. There's no building permit, there's no application. Under option B, as drafted in the ordinance, this type of work would be required to have an application reviewed by the Director of Planning and Development Services, and then the basis of the Director's review and approval would be compliance with the Central Clovis specific plan and the design standards. Just for note, I know Andy's going to go over this in a little bit more detail. The general plan has some policies outlined under our open space and conservation elements, which really outline policies for maintaining the historic integrity, character, and resource of buildings. And then the Central Clovis specific plan design guidelines further provides practical guidelines for the restoration and rehabilitation of buildings and storefronts in the Central Clovis area. Again, we're looking at preserving and enhancing those storefronts to maintain the overall character, the massing, the proportion, the surfacing, the materials, as applications come forward. The next type of approval procedure would be changes that actually require building permits. And that trigger is defined further into 2 types of categories. You would have minor repairs and modifications. That would typically be within the structure, so there would be no adverse effect to the exterior building characteristics, but there could be a tenant improvement required, some type of building permit. Again, this would come through PDS. I would, the director or its designee would review the application, and based on compliance with our Central Clovis specific plan, approval or denial would be recommended. Then a significant modification would be where a building permit is being requested to fully demolish or significantly alter or reconstruct a historic site that's been identified. At this point, the building department, if a building permit was requested for demo, they would refer that to the director. I would then convey the request to the historic board. The historic board would do their evaluation and then, based on their review, make a recommendation to the planning commission. The draft ordinance right now further has definition of hardships. So if there is a request to have any of these modifications and the decision is, the applicant could come before the Planning Commission and actually state with clear and convincing evidence that denial of their request to do any work could have a detrimental or a diminished value of the property, or it could be viewed as a prohibited reasonable use of the site. They could make that case as a hardship. Again, as the draft ordinance is, or as the ordinance is currently drafted, all decisions could be appealable to the City Council. So to be completely transparent, as we went through the last couple of months to generate this option B, there were quite a few challenges that staff were presented and we uncovered. We've listed a few of them here. Predominantly, there's a lack of funding to support all actions, staff time, and outsourcing for the Historic Preservation Board at this time and all the duties that go along with it. There is a significant amount of work in really establishing the criteria and the initial list, which could initially consume, we've heard, up to a full-time staff member, and that was based on some discussions we had with nearby cities that actually have a Historic Preservation Board. We currently do not have any in-house expertise on historic preservation, which leads us to the next bullet item. We would have to outsource support to not only the board, but potentially to staff, as applications and requests and studies for the appropriateness of these designated sites came before us. And then last, defining a historic landmark site and the maintenance of it is really subjective. So when requests would come at staff level, we would need to have some kind of expertise or very clear guidelines on what would be significant, minor, and or maintenance work. So I leave you with, while it's a bit of a learning curve, staff has identified, at least at this point, some of the challenges that would come along with option B.
All right, now I'll go ahead and go over option C, which is the do nothing option. We do have current policy on historic preservation. It's underneath our open space and conservation element, goal number 2, as Renee had described. Here are the policies 2.9 through 2.12. In our general plan and development code do encourage the protection of historic resources with a focus on preservation, adaptive reuse, or memorialization, depending on the case. Some examples of this in our Old Town area include the restaurant Salsas was one of those. Another one was Cup of Joy. We saw some positive outcomes from that, as well as a real estate company that took over a vacant space just right across the street from Fullable, where someone took an old space and with staff support and encouragement took it back to its historic roots. This is part of our general plan process. We are entering into a general plan update period, and any of these policies could be updated during that time as well. So staff, no matter what council decides tonight, given that they don't change any of these policies, will continue to implement these going forward, and they can be analyzed during a general plan update process. That concludes our report. If you have any questions, staff is available. I would like to comment that there are several written comments that council received that are on the dais for your review.
Thanks, Sandy.
Is item 18 here.
Or item 17, depending on what you're looking at.
Last week it was item 17. This week we moved to item 18.
There are indeed, from Mike Prandini, does not object to the creation of the commission as long as it's within 1 square mile and only commercial property. And from Mr. Newman at the Clovis Chamber, who may comment tonight. Where'd he go? There you are. Hi. Regarding that it's too soon to do this, and so I'm sure you'll comment on that. And from John Wright, our former planning director, supporting the formation of the committee. And finally, from Sarah Miller, looking for action on this item, and I'm sure you'll comment tonight as well. So those are the letters that we have. I think that's all. All right. Thank you, Andy and Renee and Lori. Are there any questions for staff? Drew?
Renee, you talked about in plan item option B, significant alterations. Would ADA improvements be considered significant alterations? The target obviously for tonight is the library. If they were having to put in something, an ADA ramp or something like that, would this option require them to go through this process?
I have Doug here. I'm going to answer the question. We did look at this, and I don't believe that triggers the category of significant modifications. I think they would need to do more, but I'll defer to Doug, our building official.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council. So if the historic district is created or buildings are classified as historic, so the state of Arizona does, we do adopt a historical building code that does address those items. So if a building is historic, they still have to do improvements, for instance, to comply with some form of accessibility. But it's really triggered more by what's the status of the building, what can we do without destroying the historical nature of the building. So it gives us a lot more flexibility in addressing those issues.
So if I understand what you're saying, if I'm doing it, I own that piece of property, I'm doing it to meet the ADA standards, and I'm not doing it to change the aesthetics, purposefully doing it to change the aesthetics of the building, this probably wouldn't trigger. Would that be accurate?
Just ADA.
Yeah, it would just address, well.
I realize we're talking about a what-if situation. I'm just trying to.
I think I can answer better by saying if it's not a historical building, there's really no trade-off.
Right.
You just have to make it comply, whatever the cost, whatever that does to the structure, you follow me? You can destroy the building trying to make it compliant. But if it is a historical building, then we have more options on how compliance is achieved. More flexibility.
Renee, I also have a question on item option B with the historical commission being involved. It said monthly meetings. Is there really a workload for a monthly meeting here?
There isn't, but as I indicated, we're on a learning curve, and right now we established it as monthly meetings, so we would have the board members that are identified and appointed to this group with a meeting date on their calendar, so in the event we had to have a meeting, it would be easy to convene and also easy to cancel if we had no need for that meeting.
So if we were to go with option B or a hybrid option D, where we convene a panel, they identify the buildings or the areas, we put that in a file, and if for some reason location number 10 comes up on something, then we would reenact this. We'd say, okay, commission, here's your stuff, we're going to be doing this, take a look at it, because otherwise it'd be kind of just mundane, whatever planning commission stuff, sorry Mike, comes forward. I don't know that we need to create a bureaucracy, but have been thoughts on that?
You're absolutely correct. We would only convene the meeting as needed. So really it would be for significant modifications that would require the board to meet to review the request and then make a recommendation to the Planning Commission. If there's no need for them to review something, we would not hold a meeting. So we could find that monthly meetings are not necessary, but not knowing what type of impact we could be facing for the draft, we identified monthly meetings for now.
And if I could just add, we started off with quarterly meetings. And in speaking to the city of Visalia, the initial work required to get this thing going could be pretty significant. And that could require monthly meetings until you develop criteria and you have the identified structures that you want on the list. And then from there on, it's kind of on an as-needed basis.
And there are some annual obligations as well of the body to report to council, so that at least would be an annual meeting or so to check in and reassess the historic list going forward as well.
And part of this option, did we identify an overlay? Is it within a square mile of Old Town? Or has that even been discussed?
I identified that. And what I did was try and just make this somewhat manageable initially. And so I just identified the initial 1 mile where the city was incorporated in 1912.
That seems appropriate, because otherwise, it's funny, when I was in Germany recently, and someone told me that we think 100 years is old, and they think that 800 years is new. So I guess it depends on your definition.
And that could be expanded on at a later date.
But I'm thinking keeping it to the original city boundaries that's what we're looking to do for the historic purposes. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Drew. Uh-oh.
I defer to
Vaughn.
I think before, since Councilmember Messenger just touched on that, I have more of an issue with that actual district, because there are probably buildings out there that we may annex that are precious and or has historical meaning. So that's why I kind of wanted to dig into that a little bit more. But let me start from the beginning, or should we go there first? Okay, let me start from the beginning. My understanding from the June 6th council meeting was tonight should be, here, council, this is how you establish it. Go forward. In other words, a step forward, not a interim, not too sure. Okay, start it, but hey, we don't have much, so we may not be able to do it. In other words, it's very not positive to what the last meeting was. And if they're not going to, don't even do anything, council. I felt from the last meeting, the people who had all the T-shirts, who gave us T-shirts too, that we were going to really work together to bring back this evening. Here it is. This is how we will do it. This is how it's going to get started. And council, do you want anything else to add? I've always felt that's how Clovis has always done things, and that's what I understood. It says here, council directed staff to establish the advisory board. And so I know that, yes, option B, it does establish it. A does do an interim, but it doesn't sound like we were at it and, hey, let's talk to all the stakeholders. BIA, what are your thoughts? People who own large property or families who've been here several generations, what are your thoughts? The committee, what are your thoughts? Okay, and here it is. The council wants us to establish this. Let's do it. Okay, here. And even with option B, I felt it wasn't even firm enough to move forward. That's why I was a little disappointed with in reading this and seeing where it was. And so I guess my first question is, in getting to tonight, did we reach out to any of the interested parties, whether it's the chamber, the committee, the Dry Creek, to the BIA, to certain families, outside of staff? Did we reach out to anyone to get their input for what we formed this evening, other than our attorneys?
Specifically, no, we did not.
Okay. And then my I guess, option A, I don't see a point in it if we're just going to do option B, okay? Because an interim, I think it doesn't do anything. So I'm just going to go straight into option B. With option B, why is there the first bullet point in 8A that it concentrates? In other words, it seems to make it where that's a district. I feel like it's limiting because it goes straight into, hey, you're going to develop this initial list, but only work in this area, which may be where it may go, but I think to direct it gives them less authority. And I would just go find historic property within the city and give it to us, meaning to the council or to the planning commission. And so that's my first comment. I would not agree with putting that there. And then the historic district is the second issue. I truly feel like there, some developments, there's a tree that we saved because it was historical. And so in other words, it's outside of that area, and it may not even be, it may be a pond we want to save, because it's always been there, that has some significant value, or a farm or a barn, whatever it is. And and because the city's always growing, there are properties already out in the community, even, Mr. Schmidtkamp is here, maybe even his parents' home is something in which we may want to preserve because they've been here, hundreds of years. And so something like that in which we allow the opportunity to go outside of that district. That's sort of my comment with that. And then in your presentation, Renee, in the last bullet, you said the definition of what historic, that is something we would not put in the code and the committee would form? Is that how it works? I'm trying to understand that part. If we go back to, I was going to ask you.
Said it was subjective, was your point, Renee?
Oh, yes, okay.
So defining historic landmark, yeah.
Yeah, so defining a historic landmark site.
Microphone.
Okay, sorry. Under the challenges, part of what the board would help define is criteria on what constitutes significant, minor, and maintenance work. So as applications come forward, we're clear on, what the correct process is. So this was just lending itself to, staff is not well-versed on the historic sites and what would constitute each of those activities. We've got a general understanding of what maintenance would include, if there's no significant alteration. But then when you start getting into permits that would be required and what constitutes a minor modification versus a major modification, we would look at providing some kind of definition.
That's only after it's already designated historical. So the code doesn't do that. So my question is more, what's the criteria for it to be historical? Is that something in which the code would not define and we leave that up to the committee to set those guidelines? Or is that something which the council later would set those guidelines, meaning whatever it is, certain, where does that fall? Where does that work?
Sure.
That definition fall?
We tried in the draft ordinance to define that, and what would happen is you'd have the committee and or somebody from the public that would want to designate a site as historic. Then we would need to have a study prepared, and that study would determine the significance or if it qualified as a historic site. Again, because staff doesn't have that expertise, it would be very difficult for us to evaluate each of those sites. And so we would be looking for a professional in that field under contract that would help us define what actually gets on that list. As Lori kind of described, the board would also be responsible for developing criteria for new sites, that we would want to add to the list, what kind of criteria that would need to be met. So the board would be very integral, along with support from maybe outside consultants on not only creating the initial list, but adding sites to the list, and then also creating guidelines on how we then would either permit or review applications for the different types of work, whether it be minor, significant, or just regular maintenance.
Okay. Got it. Let me see, the historic designation procedures, on I, can you help explain I for me, where it's saying that if we can't find the person of record, if this committee should have tried to notice or cannot notice, do I read it as the the proceedings can move forward. Is that how I'm understanding that item right there?
What section are you on? Sorry, just
It's,
clarify.
9.81.06, and then it's I.
Page 159 of the.
Page 159.
So that provision, previous in that section, there are certain notification requirements where notice does need to be mailed to the property owner and interested parties. And I is saying that failure to send that notice where the address of the owner is not a matter of public record, so if we're not able to find the owner, that would not invalidate the proceedings. So yes, as you stated, the proceedings could go forward.
And Scott, that would stand with property rights, where the city potentially can take action without the other party being notified, or because it's because this can even be where you're just trying to designate it as well, correct? Not where it's already designated and we're trying to do permits and improvements.
Right.
Correct. This is just go ahead, Lori. This is just the initial designation portion, though.
Okay.
Correct.
Right, and so the process and the notice would be published in the newspaper, so there are alternative methods for providing notice if the owner is not a matter of public record.
Okay. I just want to make sure, I don't disagree or agree, but I just want to make sure that it protects us should we move forward and then, you know, the owner shows up and says, I wanted to do this, and now they can or cannot because it's been designated. Okay. And then, let me see. For the hardship, can you go over that again? So this is after it's been designated, and then we are saying, the committee is saying they need to do something with it, or they are trying to do something with it, and they cannot because it costs?
So an example of a hardship is, and I'll kind of walk you through how I envision the process falling out. We've got a list of historic sites that have been designated, council approves, we've got the list. Then we have an applicant come forward and they want to do a major demolition or a major renovation. And so that would require the board to review their application and then make a recommendation to the Planning Commission. At the time that the item goes to the Planning Commission, the applicant could stand up and actually present clear and convincing evidence that if their permit is not approved, it actually diminishes the value of the property or it renders the site unusable. And so a decision would need to be made that there is a true hardship in that case.
And this is to avoid a taking. So the property owner, if the regulations would result in a diminution in value such that the property is no longer usable, there would be a risk of a claim that there's a taking. And so the Planning Commission would not have to deny an application for work in that situation.
Okay. Can I jump in with a question? Go ahead. A real-life scenario would be an earthquake, and your facade comes down, and you, knock on wood, let's not hope that doesn't happen. But if I own a building and the hardship is if I restore it to the original historical look, it's going to cost me 3 times more than either doing it differently or scraping it. So that they would be able to come forth and do that. Because I mean, that's a real thing that can happen. It could be a fire. It could be any number of catastrophic events that all of a sudden now, if I don't do something with this property, not only am I going to get code enforcement people coming after me, it's rendered worthless because I can't fix it economically. And that would be something that they could come forth and plead a hardship on.
Yes, the way I understand it is they would present clear and convincing facts that demonstrate there is a hardship as diminished value, maybe extreme cost, or the site is prohibited. You just can't use it.
Thank you. And the timeline, I'm looking, it's about 60 days and something eventually after the committee has reviewed it. The procedural with planning and us is about 30 days if there are no continuances, and then 60 days, it gets another 30 days, it has to come before the council. So kind of 60-day.
Yes, the timelines are outlined in the draft ordinance. Another reason why we had identified, at least initially, the monthly meetings, so we weren't further delaying actions as they come forward and would require either consideration by the Planning Commission, and then if there was an appeal, what would go to City Council.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Mr. Whalen?
Laura, you had mentioned that we were going to limit this just to commercial buildings, not residential buildings. Can you tell me the thought behind that? John wants to handle that.
I'll cover that. And part of it was going to be when we started working on this and realizing the scope of it and trying to start off with a more manageable workload for the committee to get things started, the board rather, and limit it to the historic district and the non-residential made it doable. And it's something, my concern was going to be that if we did the entire city with everything, it could potentially be 2 years worth of work to get that initial list completed. And I'm thinking that since we're relatively new at this, the draft ordinance that we start off with is not going to be what we end up with. And so if we started off with a smaller area focused, we could learn, develop, amend, and come back.
Okay. Thank you. And then when as I've been looking at the ordinance, thank you actually for putting this together for us so that we have something to kind of criticize. I guess you probably, anybody who's ever put the document together understands.
Construct.
Yeah. It appears as though, if I was a property owner and I had an area that, or building that had some historic significance, I'm not so sure that I'd want my building designated as a historic building. And the reason for that is that it just seems to provide it prohibits me from making some alterations to a building that I own. And had there been any thought, or in your conversation with others, was there some conversation related to incentives to have a building designated as historic? I think that, for example, when we were talking briefly about ADA, if it's on the National Register of Historic Places, then perhaps maybe there's going to be some benefit that, you can say, okay, well, some of these rules don't necessarily apply to me. I don't know if that's a really great example because it really seems not to matter too much when it comes to ADA. If you have a building that's going to be destroyed as a result of trying to comply with ADA, then you don't have to go through all of that. The rules of ADA, you can kind of do some modifications without destroying the building. So anyway, my question is, has there been much thought into incentivizing the participation in this process for those who own a building that may have some historic value?
There are, in some instances, property tax incentives available if the property owner and city enter into a contract related to the property, designating it historic. And so that's one option.
Could we do something like that? I mean, property taxes doesn't feel necessarily like a city form of legislation or regulation.
We can take a look at it, but I don't know at this point.
Okay. All right.
And if I could just add to that, it's going to be that, in communicating with the city of Visalia, which started their Historic Preservation Commissioner Board in 1979, as it stands right now, one incentive some of the residential property owners have of wanting to be identified as a historic is going to be that their house is identified and it has a placard on it, and it's bragging rights.
Increases its value in some fashion. Yeah. Okay, and then it's really hard not to think of this in the context of the Carnegie Library, because this is something that's going to be applying beyond just the Carnegie Library. But when it came to the section related to no retroactive application, I don't know if you guys had any thought about, okay, well, as soon as this passes, somebody's probably going to, or before this passes, maybe somebody's going to be putting in some type of an application for destruction or alteration or demolition of the Carnegie Library. So how do you, what was the thought behind the no retroactive application component of it?
Well, in part, it's a due process issue because if properties are not listed or designated as historic, then they're not subject presently to additional regulation. Mm-hmm. They're currently, subject to the policies outlined under option C to encourage historic preservation. But beyond that, unless a property goes through the process and where the property owners provided due process to be added to the register, there's not really a mechanism currently to restrict the use of that property.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then I don't believe, and if somebody knows differently, please let me know, I don't believe that in the city of Clovis, anywhere, whether it's in the, the 1 square mile of our original founding, that we have any designated historic sites, either on the National Register or even California landmarks. Is that fair to say?
That's my understanding. Fresno County has some in Clovis, right, including the Carnegie, but not at the state or federal level.
And if one was to have a home or a commercial building or building of any kind designated on the national list of historic registers, do they receive some type of a benefit that we're aware of?
I believe it opens up access to some funding at that level to help preserve those buildings. Okay. I'm not sure what the level of that funding is, and there could be potential tax benefits and those kind of things. But as we haven't had any in our community, we're not super familiar with those.
Yeah, right. Okay. And Lori, do you happen to know if if something is designated either as a California landmark or on the National Register of Historic Places, if they don't necessarily have to comply with some of the ADA requirements, are they allowed to avoid some statutes or regulations that would normally apply to a building?
I don't know that I could answer that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. And I could have looked it up myself. So and I guess those are all of the questions that I have. Thank you. I struggled actually stopping my questions, but you gave me the look that
I was going to help you. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I would like to hear from the public. I want to clarify a question you asked about non-residential properties. We have some buildings in Old Town that were at one time residential, but now not residential. Do you mean non-residential ever, or do you mean non-residential today?
Non-residential today.
Non-residential today. Okay. I think what's confusing to me about the draft ordinance is that because I feel like it's solving 3 or 4 problems not clearly. So I'm not quite sure that the ordinance as a draft now gets us really any closer, because you're talking partly designation, partly property rights, partly advisory. I don't think it's a 4-year term. I mean, I think it's complicated. I think there's too many things in the ordinance that I'm not quite ready to do. So I think we're solving for a problem that's maybe different than we started out. So before we go much farther, if there's no any questions for staff, let's open the public portion and let's hear from I only see one T-shirt that's actually covered up right now, but I know there's a T-shirt underneath that gray sweater there. So if we can hear from the public, oh, there's two. I saw three. I didn't see you. Sorry. So let us open the public comment here in the chambers on this particular item. Ms. Miller.
Oh, speak, obviously. Well, I'm grateful to those of our committee who have shown up today with their T-shirts. Thank you so much. And I feel a little bit like we're trying to impose a coastal commission on the citizens of Clovis. And this is certainly anathema to anything we believe in. You know, we believe in private property rights. This started because of a transfer of property that was city property with an expectation to the Chamber of Commerce. And for whatever reason, I'm sure without malice, the Chamber of Commerce was unable to live up to what the City Council expected when they gave them that gift. So we're merely trying to save the Carnegie Library and say, if something good can come from this, and we can save Old Town Clovis, and I think not just the buildings that are businesses, but, you know, we have a remarkable, I would say a darling old town. And, you know, it would be pretty bad if we took those all down and put in high-rise apartments, you know, it'd be disappointing. So I came here tonight to tell you that I've done a little bit of research about historical preservation commissions. My sister and some activists in Paris, Texas, population 25,000, have a full-time member of staff who operates this commission. And they're a very old town, and they have a beautiful downtown. Lately, she's been working on lighting up all the trees on the plaza, and so they're very, very vibrant downtown. And I feel like a town as big as and important as Clovis can certainly have a historic preservation commission. Our committee includes some people. This is not only the original committee that started with the Historical Society, but our advisory council. Our original committee includes Paul Halagian. Well, we all know who Paul Halagian is, and he's sorry he couldn't be here tonight because he had another commitment, but he's a member of the Fresno City Historical Preservation Commission. Now, here's a man who knows a lot about that. We don't need to go to Visalia to ask them how they do it, because we've got somebody right here who tells us, you know, the ins and outs of how that could be done. Another person who is on our advisory is Chris Johnson, an architect in Fresno, and he was the key architect for the restoration of the Santa Fe Depot. And as you know, because I gave you each a book that focuses on that achievement, Chris Johnson is an expert. He lives right here in Fresno. And another person who I thought of is Matt Ainley with Four Creeks Engineering. They're doing the engineering on the Home Place project. And I read about him from time to time saving significant old buildings in Visalia. He created out of something that was quite dilapidated a new historic hotel in Visalia. He would be a great resource. So when I say that we weren't consulted, it isn't like, oh, well, you know, let's talk to all these old people about how their feelings about when they learn to read at the library. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about engaging local expertise to say what can be done. And just something my sister armed me with was that there's a program called Certified Local Government Program, and that is a state program. There's a Main Street America Movement program and the National Trust for Historic Preservation. Renee talked about that a little bit. These are carrots. These aren't sticks. We're not trying to force people to save ramshackle buildings that are going to fall down. These are big amounts of money that come from federal and state governments to help cities save their old towns. And as for myself, you know, we're kind of suicidal, so we've saved every old building east of Armstrong. But everybody doesn't have to do that. You know, that could be voluntary. You could step forward to do it. People could be invited. Maybe they don't want to do it. We're not going to go out there and tell everyone who owns a house that's 50 years old that they have to, you know, keep that in perpetuity. But I think that this approach was very, narrowly focused, but I appreciate the staff time that's gone into this. I just think we didn't start with a broad enough outline of how our group intended that this process should go. So I would request that we go back to the drawing board and just say, could we back off a little from the detail and talk to some of these experts about how it works in other cities and where it works well, because it doesn't necessarily work well in Fresno. Corona Hattersley Drayton used to be the full-time employee of Fresno, and she had some really horrible things happen in the middle of the night, you know, and she's trying to protect downtown Fresno. So it doesn't necessarily work well in every town, and you can't force people to do something against their will. But if as a community we are dedicated to saving our old town and mustering the resources that it takes to save other elements that are outside the city, if people are willing to do so, then I think we can achieve this. Thank you.
Thank you, Sari. Others? And not just necessarily in the old people category that Sari said out there.
Oh, too late.
Oh. Mr. Smith-Camp, I thought you were going to stand up next. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, speaking of old,
you
seems
said
like everything. I'm Tom Wright. I'm just speaking as a citizen tonight. Everything I do anymore is prefaced by, for your age. You know, you're doing okay for your age. And all of the things I say seem like fatherly advice to people instead of advice or comments from up here. But a couple of things struck me. This is the first time we've heard of the report, so we're a little bit in the dark here. And as are you. You know, I heard a lot of we don't know yet kind of comments tonight. My first impression is the enthusiasm, the passion for this is going to come from the committee or the board you appoint, and they'll be the driving force. And if we're ever going to get someplace with this, we need to get it formed and get it going and let the passion and the enthusiasm take over. My initial concern was seeing residential units left out of this because some of the most spectacular preservation, not very many of them, efforts so far in this community involved old homes. The original Ingmeyer home, if you're familiar with the name of the Ingmeyer family that were pioneers of this community, used to be right across the street from the library. And it was such a spectacular home that they moved it down Pulaski instead of tearing it down or remodeling it. The Tarpey Depot was another one where people's passion led to something really cool coming from that. So I think there's a lot that can be done if we just say, we're going to do this. We'll work out the details as we go. It'll be a little trial and error, but let's get committed to doing this so that 30 years from now, people aren't saying, why didn't somebody do something about that? You talk about Visalia doing this in 1979. Well, let's start it now so that however many years that is from now, we've resolved that issue. You know, the library issue is one thing, and we talk about, well, historical preservation and have to be designated. I think that's firmly been designated as a historical landmark, not just by us, but by the county and by people. So there's a commitment to the historical preservation of that building. And even you guys put conditions on some of your involvement with the Chamber of Commerce that were never met. And there has to be a provision in this process for those who make commitments but don't keep them, can't be rewarded by being given free property to do what they want to. So I don't know, I kind of, one more thing and then I'll stop. We talked about limiting it to the original square mile, but as you annex and grow, you're going to be annexing and receiving historical landmarks. I think you postponed a couple of rezonings or annexations tonight that I'm pretty sure include a couple of historical landmarks that would want to be involved in that process. So get a board or a commission or something formed and let them start hammering out some of these details. These are not unreasonable people. They will go at this with a very positive attitude and keep it positive as it goes forward, and seeing what we can do to accommodate saving the historical things and also letting projects progress as they will. So that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Other comments? Yeah, now we're talking old. Good job. I'm sorry.
Hey, Bill, what color is that shirt?
Yeah, peach.
Peach. Salmon.
Bill Smithcamp, 1564 North Middleburg Lane, Clovis. I stand here as a landowner, as a commercial building owner. I have some antique building that used to be the Bishelia Winery down on Cedar in California, built in 1946. If there's ever a building, if we ever have an atomic bomb, I want to be down there. What I'm trying to say is we need to do what's right. I don't know if we need a commission. We need to do what's right. If we get government involved, I'm nervous. God bless y'all. God bless you for putting up and doing that draft. I don't know how you did. We need to do what's right. Folks need to do what they say. I believe the only reason we're here is for the Carnegie Library, right? Built 1914, one of the very few ones left, and we're here to save the library. So I think over the long haul, we're going to get together. We're going to figure this deal out. But I don't think I want A, B, or C. I think we need to do what's right without a commission. But today is what we are, and we've got a bunch of crazies out there, so I just think that we need to save the library. And I don't want, and Councilman, that house there is only 7 years old, 70. Okay, not 100, thank heavens. The palm trees probably are 120, but the house is only 70. But there is a classic example of new meeting old, and we didn't need a commission to come in and tell us what we have to do. I think the Well Community Church, the Smith Camp family, and Wawona Packing have put together a pretty reasonable program for the community to grow. And so I think this is another opportunity for us to do the same thing outside of government. But you did get it, not you, Ken, Chamber got it gifted, right? And then you signed them the deed, so it's kind of a free program. So I think that's why it's got to this point. Anyway, thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Other comments?
Make sure we got the one side out of the way before I keep
No, we're all on the same side.
Okay.
We're all on the same side.
Greg New with the Clovis Chamber. For my email, and I sent that for last week because I wasn't able to make it, as evidenced by the questions from the council, there's some uncertainty on which direction to go. And I suggested, this is a big decision. I mean, is it an ordinance? Is it a commission? What are the rules? How does it affect property rights legally? I just think it needs to have some more time. I think there needs to be some public forums with stakeholders, talking about it, who's going to be on the commission, because they need to be impartial. It can't be, my worry is you're going to get a list together and my building's the only one on it. That's the fear. But it needs to be a little bit, I think it needs to be kind of an impartial with engineers, architects, historians. I'm all for that, moving forward. So, that's my only comment. I don't want to, do action tonight just because we're supposed to do, action or make a decision, because it is a big decision. And I'm all for Clovis. I wear it on my chest every day, so, I don't want to be saying that the chamber just wants to destroy things. We don't. We're a cheerleader for Clovis, the residents, the business owners, every day, and that's what we do. So those are my only comments. So let's just take a step back and just make sure if we're going to do this, let's do it the right way. And if it's for, and I mentioned in my letter, no offense to the current council in place, but is this a process for the next council? I mean, there's 3 seats that are potentially could change. Hopefully they don't. At least 2 of them we know will. But this is a big decision, and maybe they need some input also. So thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Anyone else? Okay, one more comment.
I wanted to report that I felt like we had a really great meeting with Greg and the chamber, and that there's really potential for us to work on the Carnegie Library and come to a solution. It seems to be among his board kind of a rising tide of the appreciation for the building itself and the desire not to be in conflict with the members of the community or feelings about anyone on the city council. So I just wanted to commend them for their willingness to have these conversations.
Thank you. Yeah, you bet. Anyone else? Are there any comments on the web? No. No? All right. Seeing no one else in the chamber, we'll close the public portion and return it to the council for discussion on option A, B, C, or D, or direction, or...
You want me to start?
You bet.
So appreciate all the comments and the work that's been done. I'm a little partial to option C, which is take no action at this time, which to a certain degree is really just kind of highlighting what we already have and under our general plan and the open space and conservation element under goal 2. I think those policies down there kind of identify for us how important it is to make sure that our historic resources are well preserved. I wasn't even around at the time, but I think a lot of us are still traumatized by what happened to City Hall in the city of Fresno, right? Because it was just such a beautiful building, and then to have it torn down and to see those pictures all of the time just replaying in our mind, that we have a renewing sense that we need to, in this area, preserve our historical places. But I think we can do that without having to have too much more government intervention than we already have in our general plan under our policies. I'm also concerned that this is going to be focused just on the Carnegie Library, and I think, frankly, that everybody's been pretty open. This is about the Carnegie Library, at least started out being about the Carnegie Library. And this ordinance is not going to be about the Carnegie Library. I think it's not just about the Carnegie Library. It's going to be about all of the buildings for the city of Clovis. If I felt like we really had a big issue with places being torn down that were of some historical significance, then I probably would be a little bit more animated, more enthusiastic about something like this Historical Preservation Council. But I don't really see that here. In fact, I think we're seeing the opposite here. We have a beautiful old town, which to a large degree has been preserved. I didn't like it when Jim's Place was torn down, but Jim's Place is historical for a variety of reasons, but probably not rising to the level of need of historic designation. But we see with Tarpey Depot, with even the places that are being used right now, I think Cup of Joy was just beautifully transformed into a building. I think 2 cities where, Carol, was it your dad or your grandpa's office was there? Your dad's office. So that's a pretty cool little building still. So it is, I'm kind of thinking that, well, this is always true. Less government is better. But if you need the government to intervene, then the government will intervene. I just don't think we need the government to intervene right now, particularly since I've heard that it sounds like the Save the Carnegie Library and the Chamber of Commerce have engaged in some discussions, some good faith discussions, and so that's where I'm headed right now, unless you guys can change my mind.
I have to agree, Bob, there's no urgency here. There's no, other than we know we're talking about the Carnegie Library. If there were several other controversial buildings, then there would be a time frame that we probably need to get something codified. I don't know that we need to do anything just at this very moment, as long as the parties are willing to sit down and have a good discussion and hopefully come to some fruition that everybody's satisfied with. We have this set up. I think it needs to be massaged a little bit more, because I don't think we would not, or at least I would not, appoint anyone to a commission where they're already an advocate for something. I think you're muddying the waters. So we'd have to find, for every person who is an advocate, I need to find, well, we got to find a historical preservation person. There needs to be an engineer, historical engineer. We need to have people with some expertise who can talk about it and not just be focused, laser pointed on one thing. So I would be fine taking no action and keeping this on the back burner until we can come up with something better.
Long?
I look at this as sort of important in that it was a library that brought up something in which we need to start to think about, because even on the level here, there are less and less of us with historical knowledge of Clovis, even something we decided, 10 years ago, Drew and I were on. So that's where I see this issue. I'm okay with not deciding anything as long as we resolve this, but this issue still needs to be brought before the citizens of Clovis. Because if you don't do it when all of you are still here, good luck, doing it with the next group of people, because they're not going to be able to go, I don't know that building, I don't know that place, I don't know. So in other words, it's important to get people together to discuss it now. We've been here about 100, however many years now, and we're losing that core. I've been here since '96, and I feel like but when I speak to veterans or seasoned,
He was going to say old people, but he caught himself.
The buildings and the trails, the farms, they coincide with the values. They coincide with the community. And so how do we work? Because I don't like government involved, but this group can get a good government structure together to where here it is. We're leaving this to you, future generations. This is what we feel is Clovis. Do with it what you please. But this is what we feel has established Clovis. And if we don't do that, then it's just the next building that, I drive by and it's nothing. But when you drive by and you can tell your kid, this is where, the first lumberjack came and all, that is so important. That drives conversation. That drives you back to why we are who we are. And so that's why I think it's so related. I don't know what the process is to get there. This ordinance may be it, but I like where we just get together and really establish something where it's solid, where it's something that we can work into a committee. But we need that. And so I know that this group wants to preserve the library, but I also know this group wants to preserve Clovis as all of us. And that's why it was important enough for the staff to take the time to really see what it is. And we love also freedom and the ability to do what you want with your property also. And that's what's conflicting us right now, because we love that so much as also. So how do we balance the two, and how do we continue this conversation moving forward? because of what's said, I like A now, because at least we get an interim group together and we kind of get you guys talking and establish certain lists of certain, even without any rules. And so it's led me to, all right, let's just do a temporary, get interested parties together, establish lists, and let's see where that leads to. Because to do nothing now may lead us to where, you know, we actually don't do anything. And so you may have to write another letter for us to talk about it again. But if we do the interim, at least it keeps it on, you know, the radar, and we can always ask about it. So I'm leaning very much towards option A now, because option B, I think, still has a lot of kinks where a lot of you still need input in order to get to.
Thanks, Vaughn. I couldn't agree more with what Vaughn said. In my mind, this actually isn't about the Carnegie Library. I think the Carnegie Library is, thank you for raising it and identifying a gap in our community that we cannot, to exactly what Vaughn said, in 50 years, Bill, we do what's right. I'm not so sure in 50 years that's going to, and I worry about that. I just don't know if everyone is going to understand the passion that you all had in this room that we have in this room. So for me, this has really nothing to do with the Carnegie Library. Thanks for raising it. But I think it's the question about how do we ensure that our history gets told again and again and again, and that it's not the Starbucks in Sierra Vista Mall that was our center of our community. That's not it. So I feel pretty strongly about that question. Now, whether it's a small group getting together for 6 months to just frame it up for us, I'm not looking for designations. I'm not looking for you can't tear it down. I'm not looking for, you know, but I'd love to see a placard sign in our old town. I'd love to see more stories told about our history so that we can ensure that that right thing is present going forward for generations to come. So I do think it's option A. I don't think the committee is to assess the resources and provide recommendations to us on how to protect them. I think the committee is to gather expertise and chart us the course forward on preserving the history of Clovis. I don't know if it's designations, or I don't know anything about that. I think the ordinance is too far. We don't know enough about that right now, so I don't want to go there. But I really do, I view this as a committee to provide input into our general plan that's coming up. We have a municipal code that says we'll have a historic preservation board. We don't execute that part of our code. So we should either execute it or take it out of our code. But I mean, I think we have the mechanism to have a conversation about what kind of place do we want to preserve and keep whole as we grow, and this to me is our opportunity. And I couldn't have said it better than Vaughn. I mean, we have one chance to do this, and maybe not one, but I mean, our chance is here. So I'm in favor of A. You all volunteered for the committee, whether you know that or not. You offered other names. I think staff could work on this for 3 or 4 months or 6 months, feed it into the general plan. If we need a structure to get the strategy accomplished, so be it. If it's a committee like the Tourism Advisory Committee, that's not an ordinance, it's not 4-year terms, it's not Brown Act, it's just a committee. Is it that? I'm not sure, but I think that a group of citizens who care deeply today could help us shape that, and we'll have something better than Visalia. I think that's where I know is possible for Clovis. So I feel strongly about option A, to keep the conversation going. Otherwise, if we languish till after the November election, then it's Christmas, and then it's January, and then, well, the president's coming along, and it's too much. So what I care about is Clovis today, so I feel pretty strongly, as you can tell, about option A, some variation of a committee to at least keep the conversation going. And the Carnegie Library is a separate problem to solve, and that sounds like good work is happening. So solve that, and let's figure out a model that will help us going forward. So right this minute, we have so you heard perspectives, a couple of on each side. So I would entertain some.
Can I make a comment?
No? Yes. I love being in charge. I can tell Bobby can't talk.
Get that gavel away from her now.
I don't have a gavel. Yes, you may.
Thank you. So I think that option A, fine, we can go with option A. That I don't have a strong objection to option A. I just want to make sure that as the people who are, assigned this task under option A, take a look at option C, because option C, while it says do nothing, like take no action, there are elements in place already in the city of Clovis and in our general plan, and I do just want to take a couple of minutes to read them to you just briefly so you know that this has been a part of the city of Clovis's plan for now and in the future. But policy 2.9 says, preserve historical sites and buildings of state or national significance in accordance with the Secretary of Interior standards for historic rehabilitation. So in our general plan, we're supposed to be preserving these historical sites and buildings, and that they already are to be in accordance with kind of some standards for historical rehabilitation. Policy 210 says, encourage property owners to maintain the historic integrity of the site by preservation, adaptive reuse, or memorialization. So we probably need to figure out within that policy, what does that look like? How do we encourage property owners to maintain the historic integrity? Policy 211 says, prioritize the preservation of the historic character and resources of Old Town. And policy 212 says, support public education efforts for residents and visitors about the unique historic, natural, and cultural resources in Clovis. I think it would be, as a visual aid, it'd be cool to be able to point to the students saying, hey, this is a building, this is the Tarpey Depot, this is why it was significant. You know, they can just look at a picture of it in their classroom, and then when they drive by it on Clovis Avenue, they'll say, hey, that's the Tarpey Depot, I know a little bit about that. So anyway, my point is that I don't want us to have a 2-2 kind of deadlock. I would, I'm okay with option A, just I wanted to highlight option C as maybe a good starting point, if not a closing point for whatever that option A looks like.
Thanks.
Option A just does what option C does, but puts it into action.
Is that a motion, Vaughn, for option A?
I already said okay.
Oh, is this an action or is this direction? It says consider.
Where are you? I want to know where you are.
Hold on. Is it consider options? Are you looking for a motion on a particular action, or are you looking for direction?
Well, ideally, we'd have an option selected.
Okay, so you actually want...
If not direction, if we ended up going with Bob's amended and going with option A, I would be just looking for feedback on what your expectations are for the role of staff and the configuration of the committee.
Okay. Drew?
No, Vaughn convinced me item A is probably the way to go. It does move the ball forward. The question is, what are the rules of the game?
All right, so do you want to comment, do you want to make a motion that we explore option A, moving it, not explore, skip that verb. Move ahead with option A, establishing a committee. We can take names for volunteers now. What is the role of staff? And what was the second question? God, my memory.
What would be the configuration of the committee?
Oh, okay. So committee and the role of staff?
You didn't provide the detail with A. No. See, I like A doing C with those policies, what Bob mentioned. I really like that because we already have the policies in place. So how does A create mechanisms for us or guidance for us or direction with regards to policy 2.9 through 2.12? But the details that the staff is asking for, is that something we want to establish right now?
I think staff's looking for direction if we had it. If you want to make a motion on that, on some variation of what you just said, and we can give the direction on the role of staff. I guess my view is the role of staff is the convener of the committee, just like the Tourism Advisory Committee. And I think the configuration of the committee is whoever volunteers. I mean, you have people in the audience now, you know, Sarah, you mentioned others. It's not a lifetime commitment. It's still not a 4-year commitment at all. So you put out a call. You're welcome. I think you could put out a call for volunteers who want to serve on it. I mean, I think there's a couple ways to get at that, but I mean, I think we have a few willing volunteers in the audience to start it out.
If I could add also is going to be that one potential hybrid would be the combination of A and C. As Bob kind of explained, in that forming of the committee that we could meet with to potentially give us more feedback on what we have in the current general plan and as we begin to develop the updated general plan.
Well, I think that was my comment, right? This could feed into that general plan process as it goes. But I think I think maybe the folks would say it could be A and the things that you said there, but it could be something else. I mean, the committee might have some different perspective. We have a municipal code that calls for this committee. Either execute it or take that out of the code. We have policies in our general plan. Are those the right policies? Is there something else? So I think there's a framework. You're not starting with like it could be anything, but I think you have a framework for the discussion. You have direction from the council. Citizens will lead us to the answer. But staff can facilitate that. I don't think we need to outsource it. I don't think any of those things. I think we can facilitate a conversation with citizens and get us where we need to go. And then we can come back and act on it at some future date if we decide we want something more formal.
Okay, and then just one further clarification, no criteria on who could participate.
Actually, I kind of penciled some stuff in. I don't think we should have everybody who wants to be part of it, because I've been in committees where you had too many people. And so maybe we make it no more than 10 people. Clovis resident or a property owner in Clovis. Staff facilitates the meetings. We give them a place to have the meetings, and staff would be the kind of the person who would deal with the Robert's Rules of Orders and kind of keep things moving, and then they make a report back to us. I guess my question would be to the audience, and obviously we're past public comments. There may be some folks who have integral ties to downtown that have moved and no longer own businesses downtown. And I don't want to exclude them, but I don't want to have somebody who has no dog in the fight just coming in because Jerry Springer isn't on anymore and they want to do something with their afternoon. I mean, I want people who have a dog in the fight. So maybe we could figure out some verbiage for that.
Jerry Springer? What are you doing in the afternoon?
I think I have a motion.
All right.
So, I move that we establish an ad hoc committee that would assess historic resources in the city of Clovis and provide recommendations to City Council on the protection of those identified resources. The membership of the committee will be consist of 5 members, and each member shall be appointed by the City Council following recommendation by the mayor and a resident of the city. So that's my motion. And just for clarification purposes, that doesn't mean other people can't participate in the conversation. It's just that when it comes to, making the recommendations, voting on what's going to be presented, then it would just be those 5 people who would be the voters of that.
All right, there's a motion. Is there a second to that motion?
Bob, would you be willing to move it to 10, 2 each from us?
I'm happy to do that. So you want 10 to be appointed by the mayor with the council approval, or do you want each council member to have 2 choices?
I'm fine with either way because I'm comfortable. I'm very confident in who the mayor would choose as well. So either way is fine for me. But to move it to 10, so that way it's a broader group because it's the beginning.
Yeah, it's great. If there's 10 people that want to do it, that's fine. But I think I'm going to probably modify the motion to have each council member choose 2. Is that all right? That way, I think that we can make sure that everybody's concerns can be addressed. And if you have one, if you get to point 2, you can have one that's like, save, a house that was built 20 years ago, and others who are saying, that it should be preserved only if it's in Old Town and it's been here at the beginning.
I'll second that unless you have recommendations.
So in this motion, if you're a property owner but don't live in the city, you can still participate. You're just not a committee member.
Yeah, you're not going to be a voting member.
I can live with that.
Okay, yeah.
I'll second that.
Did you get it?
I don't like it, but I got it.
What? How can you not like it?
No, so it's a committee, 10 people, 2 per council member, have to be a resident. Not a property owner, just a resident. All right.
What don't you like about it?
Because you might be a property owner and not live in Clovis, and your dad had an office in Old Town and you don't qualify. Just saying. I'm not speaking about the Linden box. I'm just saying there's lots of examples where people don't have residents in Clovis, but
I'm sure Carol would participate in one way or another.
Anyway, so that's all. I think that's a little narrow, but some of our best historians don't live in Clovis anymore. I bet you that is true. Peg Boss doesn't live in the city of Clovis anymore, and she would be.
She could participate.
All right, so.
If you open it up, I mean, I don't mind talking about it. I mean, can we talk about it?
No? Yes.
I mean, here's the deal. It's like if you don't limit it to people who live within the city of Clovis, then, you know, I think we're all probably going to choose pretty good people, but
it's good.
You get some people coming in from out of nowhere who have a whole different view of what the city of Clovis stands for, and I'm not so sure that we would like that.
It's fine. Okay, there's a motion on the floor to, you heard it, ad hoc committee, 10 people, 2 per council member, resident of Clovis. Focus is not the Carnegie Library. Focus is longer term. Policies, as Bob read, municipal code language, and something else that you all can identify as an opportunity. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right. Just did, but we're moving it forward. We're doing something, and you all will do the work. That's great how that works out. And we'll see where we are. And you will live by the motto of our beloved Harry Armstrong, and seconded by Bill Smitkamp. Just do the right thing. Thank you all for the passion, and keep talking on the Carnegie Library. Keep working on that. Come back when that's solved, too. Thank you all.
Mayor, I just wanted to clarify, that was a 401.
Oh, sorry, it was a that motion passes 4-0 and 1 abstention. Okay, so, hi.
Hi.
We missed you. Did you take a little nap?
I could have.
You could have.
Okay, but they removed the couch, so
Now they have the new furniture. Now you're going to.
I am. I'm going to go.
Okay, so next on the agenda, consider item associated with approximately 4.45 acres of land located at southeast corner of Armstrong and Gettysburg Avenues, Gary McDonald Homes, Glen Eagles. Property owner, applicant, Harbor, and Associates representative, and Mayor Pro Tem Ashbeck has a conflict.
I will recuse myself as this item is within 500 feet of my residence.
Okay, and the items are A, consider approval of resolution, tentative map 6403, a request to approve a vesting tentative tract map for a 50-lot single-family subdivision of approximately 4.45 acres of land, and B, consider approval of resolution PDP 2022-01001, a request to approve a planned development permit to allow deviation from the R1B single-family residential 12,000 square foot zone district residential development standard associated with tentative map 6403, and this will be presented by City Planner David Merchant. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is being managed as a project by George Gonzalez, our senior planner. George is at 6 today, so I'm covering the item for George. The location of this project is at the southeast corner of Armstrong and Gettysburg Avenues. The site is just a little under 4.5 acres in size. The site is currently vacant. Until just a little while ago, it had a rural residential home site with a couple of outbuildings on it. Those sites and buildings were cleared in preparation for the redevelopment of the site. As you can see from the aerial photo, it's substantially surrounded by existing single-family residences on lots that are similar in smaller sizes in general. The most immediate project and most recent project is the Young Properties mapped immediately to the south, which included 9 lots of lots as small as 4,500 square feet, and those are all served by that cul-de-sac just below the project site. There's 2 entitlements that are proposed this evening. The first is Tract Map 6403. This is an infill site of 15 single-family lots. The density here is around 3.5 acres, 3.5 dwelling units per acre. I think the staff report describes that it's 3.4 units per acre, but it's right around 3.5 one way or another, which is consistent with the low-density land use designation, which allows 2 to 4 dwelling units per acre, and that's really the same for all of the surrounding area. The plan development permit that's currently proposed here establishes or proposes to establish the design and development criteria for this map. The underlying zone district here is R1B, which is kind of a large lot single-family zone district of 12,000 square foot lot minimums. That's probably a holdover from the existing rural residential, the previous rural residential use of this site, and is much larger than all of the surrounding single-family lots. The proposal at this point is to keep the lots fairly large, but to reduce it from a 12,000 square foot minimum to an 8,000 square foot minimum. As part of this plan development permit, it would also be gated. The streets would be private. There would be no interior sidewalks on those private streets, and there would be setbacks that are reduced and increased lot coverage from what would be normally allowed in the R1B zone district. The last 2 bullet points, the sidewalks and the development standards, drew some discussion at the Planning Commission meeting. There was some concern by the Planning Commission that the lack of sidewalks could affect pedestrian walkability and safety, and there was some concern about the nature of the setbacks that were being proposed, particularly along the rear of properties. The Planning Commission worked with the applicant to clarify that there would be CC&Rs inside the map, which would prohibit on-street parking, reducing conflicts with vehicles parked on the street and pedestrians, creating additional visibility as well. And the Commission also asked for and ultimately increased the rear setbacks on all lots to 20 feet to make sure that there were usable rear yards that were not a reason for kids, for instance, to have to play in the front yards of those homes. The resulting setbacks that are proposed here are really quite consistent with what's been approved in the surrounding area. It's standard 5-foot setbacks in the front, 20-foot setbacks in the rear, 20-foot front setbacks to the garage, and a particular request for an allowance for a 10-foot setback to the living space, which is something that we're seeing pretty frequently to allow variation in the streetscapes. So that under that condition, living space would be moved up a little closer to the front, while the garages would be set back a little further towards the rear. As the Council has seen in the past, in conjunction with the flexibility that is added through a plan development permit as a trade-off and a project amenity is generally incorporated, staff goes through what might be described as a tiered evaluation for what an amenity might look like. First, we look to on-site, and then we look to the immediate surrounding area, and ultimately look for something that's further detached geographically from the site. In this case, due to the scale of the project and its relatively small location, there just wasn't a good opportunity to include an on-site amenity. We looked at the surrounding area, and particularly at the Gettysburg Park, located just a little bit outside the project boundaries, and although there was an interest in finding an amenity to add to that park, that didn't quite work out, and so we moved further away from the site and identified that there were a couple of bus stop locations that lacked shelters, and as a result, we identified that project amenity, at least in the general area, would or could include a bus stop shade structure. If for any reason that doesn't work, as a backup, the project would contribute funds to a regional trail improvement, located, some additional distance from the project site. But that would only be pursued if we couldn't work out the logistics to install one of those shade structures. Based on the information that I described, staff and the Planning Commission recommend approval of the track map, the plan development permit, and the finding of consistency for the proportional dedication of right-of-way associated with the project. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Dave? Sure.
Go ahead, Bob.
So, Dave, no HOA, we're trying to use the CC&Rs as kind of our quasi-HOA. It sounds like the homeowners themselves are going to be enforcing whatever rules are going to be in place within the CC&Rs.
Yeah, the applicant can answer that question in more detail. Our understanding from their testimony at the Planning Commission is that there will be a management entity associated with this site that would and has in other projects overseen and enforced the CC&Rs.
Okay, when you guys are ready to make the presentation, if you can address that for me, I'd appreciate it. And as far as the shade structure for the a bus stop, where's this bus stop?
There are two bus stops located in the general vicinity. One is next to the school located to the west, and one is roughly a half mile on Gettysburg, a half mile east of the project site.
Okay. All right, I'll make comments about that later. Thank you.
Drew? Okay, could you bring back the map? On Gettysburg, if I live on lot number 4 and I'm having some people over, I'm having a birthday party, obviously the people visiting me won't be able to, unless I give up my front yard to people where they can park on my driveway, those people are going to have to park on Gettysburg. Is there parking on Gettysburg in this plan?
I don't believe parking on Gettysburg is permitted, but I don't have that information with me, and I'm not sure.
Or on Armstrong. Because what I'd hate to see us do is set something up where you make it so difficult it fails, and everybody walks away angry. I think there is parking, well, because there isn't, it's just dirt now. So if we had parking on Gettysburg and parking on Armstrong, it would at least alleviate how are my guests going to get here, and, you know, and then it would alleviate, because eventually what happens a lot of times is Sunday afternoon, somebody has a big party, they call the police department because they're parked illegally, we explain to them that we don't enforce that, and then they get even madder. And it just creates another problem sometimes. So if we can set this up where we have parking along the exterior, I'm fine with it.
I don't know. If I may, I live in the area. You can park on Gettysburg and Armstrong, and my understanding is that in the internal street would allow for on-street parking as well. I could be mistaken on that. But am I mistaken on that, Dave?
I believe the intent of the CC&Rs is to prohibit on-street parking within the development.
Okay. My misunderstanding.
Well,
yeah, my biggest concern is with regards to parking extra vehicles outside. I know we see it on Locan and Ashland, sort of the south side, you know. There's plenty of room, but right there it's not an intersection. Here it's right by the intersection. And so that's my biggest concern from the stretch of Armstrong to the entrance. And so I think where the entrance, the inlet forward, it's okay. So however we can look at that part, because if there's no on-site parking on the street, people most likely will park out there, and if it's too close to the intersection, because I know that it's one of those where it's a pretty wide bike lane, and you can park as well. So I know that you can park on Gettysburg. And a school, yeah. So that's my only concern, if we can address that or look at that.
I just pulled up the Google Street View for that particular location, and just to confirm it, at least when you look at the north side of Gettysburg, you do have a good-sized bike lane, and then you have area for parking. When you get up to the turn lanes, there's no parking, right there at the intersections. And so we probably need to just encourage, the same as you are close to the intersection. But, I think it's I mean, to your point, Drew, I think it's kind of problematic in the sense that with no on-street parking, you're gonna have a party there. Somebody's gonna have a birthday party. And then, and everybody's gonna park on the street. And, you know, I don't know who's supposed to go out there and enforce that, but somebody's gonna probably call either Clovis PD, and then they're gonna be drawn into something that should be handled through CC&Rs and management. And I think that's a valid concern. But also, the Planning Commission also has their legitimate concerns as well, that if there's going to be if you're going to have an area like this, and I keep wanting to call it a planned unit development. I think it's called something else. What is it now? A PDA? Public Display of Affection?
Plan Development Permit?
What is it?
Plan Development Permit, PDP?
Oh, PDP, thank you, okay. You know, they have concerns, that if, you know, you're gonna have kids, they're gonna be coming, you know, out between parked cars. It's not a particularly large site. I don't think that we're really gonna have people zooming down the street. Can you put that, site plan up there, please? I mean, you're gonna come in, you're gonna go right, you're gonna go left. I mean, if you get over 7 miles an hour, I'm gonna be surprised. So, how narrow are the streets?
The internal street, curb to curb is the same as a public street, which is, I believe, 36 feet curb to curb.
So there'd be room to park on both sides?
Correct. The standard was set to allow parking. The commission had that particular concern, and so that's where the CC&Rs were brought up.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, I know we're at kind of the question and answer portion. I just wanted to address the Gettysburg parking, that you can park there.
So, let me just, Dave, it was the Planning Commission who imposed no parking internally, or was that the applicant's self sort of rule?
The Planning Commission raised the issue during its discussion of the item, and the applicant in their response identified that there would be CC&Rs, and the intent of the CC&Rs would be to prohibit on-street parking.
But before the Planning Commission brought it up, was the intent to allow parking, or is that something?
There was nothing in the conditions or in staff's review which would have prohibited on-street parking. Okay. If the applicant intended to prohibit on-street parking, that would have just been at their own initiative.
And in other developments where we do kind of have a gated, we do allow on-street parking, correct?
I have not seen on-street parking prohibited, but I believe there are some projects, including some
only on one side only. I've seen where it's on one side, the narrow street.
Yeah, in the elevations projects.
Okay.
But we'll limit it to just one side. Right.
And you're saying these are wide enough, but the Planning Commission's, because of the Planning Commission's concern, the applicant was willing to put that in the CC&R, so that way there's no parking on the street.
Yeah, I think
that's how it all went.
To be fair, the applicant would have to say whether they intended to do that, with or without the Planning Commission.
Thanks.
Any more questions? Okay, at this point, I'll open it to the public. Anyone wishing to comment on this item? Let's come forward.
Good evening, Mayor, Council members. My name is Lauren Smith. I'm with Harbor and Associates Engineering, 389 Clovis Avenue. Dave spoke correctly. We had designed this subdivision where we would allow parking on both sides of the street. We purposely left off sidewalks so that we could add land into the lots because we have short streets, and the parking or the drive speeds would be greatly reduced for that purpose. Because the cul-de-sacs are so short. The developer has another subdivision that they have built at Teague and Peach, I believe it is, southwest corner. that they have imposed no parking on the streets, even though that they were wider. I'd have to let them speak to that. I don't remember the purpose of that. But because they had done it successfully in another situation, and this will have an HOA with a management team that could manage it. Yes. That was the purpose for conceding the parking and moving forward with it. You know, I understand the concerns of parking on the outside of the subdivision. Parking on the subdivision would be nice as well. It's really the council's preference in this case. So with that said, I'd like to speak to how we got to this design, if you don't mind, if that's a concern. Being that this is infill and the depth north to south is shallow, we were limited to our access out to Armstrong. City staff recommended that we have pretty much the design that we have as you see now. They didn't propose gates, and the developer thought it was a good idea to gate it and try to make the lots as large as possible. And as you can see, it looks like a well-done project, in my opinion. And the larger lots, you know, the staff report is prepared very well. It has a comparison from the R1B development standards to what we proposed. We did have the option to propose R1 zoning on this site, which would have reduced those setbacks closer to what we're proposing now. But with discussions with planning as well, we already needed to propose the PDP, and with the PDP we could reduce the lot size and hopefully achieve everything with one application. So if we were to look at this development as an R1 development, all we are requesting for reduction really is basically a front yard setback to make the backyards larger. And then if you look at our house plans in the packet, you'll see that there are very few, I think there's only one house, maybe two, that actually has living area out in front of the garage. So we will, in most cases, we won't go down to 10 feet, but when you go around the cul-de-sacs, we may have situations where we go down to 10, but the driveway will still be 20. And then we believe that we can maintain or will maintain the 20-foot rear yards on the cul-de-sacs as well. So we believe that we have a very nice project proposed here, and I'd be happy to answer any further questions you may have.
Any questions?
I do. I didn't look at the schematics or the renderings for the houses. Are these two-car garages?
Yes.
And will the driveways going in there be big enough so conceivably two in the garage, two in the driveway? Could
be, yes. And one of the homes has a tandem garage, and some of the homes are three-car garage. So they would have a wider garage, and on the three-car, tandem wouldn't be any wider, but they would have room for two cars in the driveway at least.
And while the CC&Rs would prohibit on-street parking, there would be nothing to prohibit people from parking in their own driveway?
Correct.
Okay. That's all I need to know. Thank you.
Any more questions? Thank you. Anyone else wishing to comment on this item? Garcia.
Hi, I live on Joshua on the north side, which is, you can see it on the map. And is there only one entrance into the development?
According to this map, yes.
Okay. That's a lot of, you're going to have to walk a long distance to get out to Gettysburg if you park on Gettysburg, if there's no parking inside that development. That's insane. And right now, I've lived there 30 years, by Lynn, around the corner from her, and that intersection is a really busy intersection, and there's no space when you know, coming into that and going those few houses to pull into that development is gonna be tricky. And then if you have people that are coming to those houses, having to park on Gettysburg or having to walk all the way to Armstrong, it's gonna be a mess. So I don't know why they can't park in front of their houses if they have the space. That's all I'm pointing out.
Well, the people that live there will have at least 2 parking spaces, maybe 3. The people that live in...
I don't know, if you live in, you're from Clovis, we party, we have good, we have parties, we have people on the weekends, and...
They are.
Anyway, I'm just saying that, and...
You're talking about special events, parties.
Well, I'm talking about my daughter. I'd like to buy my daughter one of those lots, and she's probably going to have 5 kids. So, I mean, we're talking about... No. That's why I'm here, because I'm concerned about those lots. And I want to buy one, but I don't want to have people park on Gettysburg or Armstrong. And you're going to have to hoof it to go out of the development to go on Armstrong. That's all I wanted to bring to your attention.
Thank you.
Okay?
Anyone else?
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Gary McDonald, and I'm the developer for the project. I wanted to comment, over the last 18 months, we've acquired 6 different sites for infill. Each one of those have a special problem. The reason they're infill is they're difficult to deal with. I hope you've been able to look along on Nees Avenue, the most difficult place there at Timmy, and see what we've been able to do with that project. It's a beautiful one. There's 10 lots there, and we have 7 of those sold, and they'll be occupied momentarily. We have a site over on further east on Nees Avenue. We have just finished up at Gettysburg and Peach, 5 units there with ADUs in the back to improve the area and the tax basis. We have studied with the staff this site and worked diligently with them. It was our preference not to have a cul-de-sac like it is, but rather to come in off of Gettysburg and be able to go into Armstrong or come from Armstrong and go back out on Gettysburg. However, they opposed that. There are other sites in Clovis that are like that. And so we were at 16 lots, so we had to reduce it down to make the site as it is to 16 lots. To 15 lots from 16. So each one of these has this problem. Many of these houses will have 3-car garages, and there'll be space for 2 or maybe even 3 cars parking there. Our concern as developers always to try to work with the community. And the Planning Commission did say that they were concerned about the issue, and we said we can restrict the parking. It wouldn't keep us from selling these homes. We have some projects that have restrictive parking and others that do not, that are gated. So if it were a deal breaker, we would say certainly we're willing to either have it parking or no parking at the discretion of the City Council. And so with the full support of the Planning Commission, no one appeared to oppose this project at the Planning Commission, and the only interest or concern was somebody maybe wanted to buy one of those, so we're happy for that. Anyway, I would be very, very grateful if you would approve our project and let us go ahead and get this area that's been sitting there a long time, and it would be occupied with some beautiful homes that would make all of us proud. And I thank you for your service.
Thank you, Gary. Gary, I think Councilmember Messenger has
Not really a question, it's more of a statement. Your project at Nees and Timmy really kind of saved our bacon, because we had lots of good meeting people coming in and opposing every single project that was proposed there. Mm-hmm. And I really didn't think that it could be done with single-family homes, and you proved me wrong, and I appreciate it. That's a great site.
Thank you.
I've got a question, if I may, too.
Sure.
So, how many of the projects that you developed would you say have an HOA component?
Well, the case, with these 6 that we were talking about, only this one has the HOA.
Okay.
Of course, we've built several other projects in Clovis that do have HOA.
All right.
And I've been doing HOA projects, for more than 40 years. And, they've been very successful. And as mentioned, at Peach, and,
Teague, I think
Teague, we have that 80-lot project there. And the people who live there, they think it's the nicest one in Clovis. It's a beautiful project.
So when the HOAs are, formulated, does the association come up with some of their own rules if they wanted to have their own rules?
They could and do.
Including parking rules if they want?
They could do whatever about parking after it's done. However, if the council was to say no parking, then it would be a different arrangement. The HOA would have to abide by that.
Understood. Okay. All right. Thank you, Gary.
And Gary, in front of the homes, is there enough, there's enough for at least one car to be parked in front of the home?
Oh, there's room for more than one. Yes. The lots are 80 feet wide, or how wide are they? Yeah, there's over 75 feet wide, so a car is basically 20 feet, the long ones.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else in the public here present wishing to comment on this project? Anyone on the web?
No one on the web.
Okay, I'll bring it back to council.
There was some written correspondence. Did I understand that correctly? Oh, no, I think that was in our packet. Yeah. Okay. That's where I read that. So, I got a few comments, and then, I'll probably move that we approve it with a modification that we don't have that parking restrictions. If they want to do that on their own as an association, then they can do that on their own. But, I wanted to first address the issue of a public benefit. Whenever we do a PDP, we want to make sure that there's some benefit that the public derives as a result of some of these special considerations that are given for a PDP. Here, I guess I'll just first say that this is an infill development, is a public benefit to begin with. I think that, Mr. McDonald has a good reputation for building quality homes. And I think at that particular location, I don't know if what was shown up there when we saw the site plan was the actual elevation of what your gated area is going to look like. Or is that just some kind of a copy and paste? That is what's, yeah, okay. Yeah, right up there, because I think that can look pretty nice. So I see that as a public benefit. When it comes to shade structures for a bus stop, we just don't have a lot of people riding our buses right now, even though it's free. They still don't seem to be riding them. I'd rather the money be used in some other fashion than a shade structure for a bus stop. And I think one of the options was to kind of utilize something the equivalent of what the shade structure would be for some trail within that, presumably the Loma Vista area or some other trail amenity in the city of Clovis. So my view is that if I can kind of make sure that happens instead of the shade for the bus stop, that would be something that would be important to me. So having said all those things, and so we have something to criticize, I'm going to make a motion. So I move that we first approve tract map 6403, the request to approve a vesting tentative tract map for a 15-lot single-family subdivision of approximately 4.45 acres.
I'll second it.
We have a motion second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
So motion carries 4 with 1 abstention.
And then secondly, on the approval of the resolution related to the PDP, I want to remove the requirement for that parking be prohibited on the street, and that if somebody wants to go ahead or if the association wants to make that, they can do that on their own. So with that modification, as well as, money, instead of being used for shade structure for a bus stop, that it be used for the other option, which was a trail amenity somewhere in the, vicinity. So approval of the resolution of the PDP with those two modifications.
Clarification, Bob, no sidewalks? Still?
No sidewalks.
Okay.
Would that have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, we have motion second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
So 4 and 1 recusal, and the motion passes.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, council members. Also, we would prefer just to make a cash contribution to those things rather than to,
Okay.
we will do that.
Sounds
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you, Gary.
Gettysburg Park right around the way.
Yeah. Yeah, but they said that's in pretty good shape right now. So something along the trail.
We need to start a fund to get a trail counter down there in South Beach.
And not a garbage can? I know.
Okay.
A little bit bad about that recommendation. It's a great idea, but I wish they could possibly.
Next item, city manager's comment. John?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to go over a couple things as far as a tentative schedule over the next couple of months with council meetings to give you a heads up. Everything is still TBD, but I just wanted to kind of put the idea out there of what we were thinking about. So we've got the November election. The county clerk has 30 days to certify the election. So I don't know exactly when we'll have the information ready for the reorganization. In looking at the calendar also, we're likely to cancel the meeting on November 21st because that's Thanksgiving week. I'm proposing that we consider having a reception for Mayor Flores, Councilmember Whalen, and the Christmas tree lighting on the December 5th meeting. We'd probably just have a consent calendar and maybe like a 5 o'clock reception going into kind of a ceremony at 6 o'clock, and then possibly lighting the tree up about 7. And then we would do the council reorganization at the December 12th meeting, because I should definitely have the county clerk results by then. If the December 12th doesn't work, we can always call a special meeting for the reorganization, but as it stands right now, that's my thoughts for the schedule for the next couple months. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Okay. Council comments, Bong?
Yeah, excellent, program at the fire station. It was beautiful. I think that, John, what you said about, and Chief said about just it being an anchor and really revitalizing that area is true. And then, 9/11 ceremony, that was also beautiful. It was quick, just very meaningful, very moving as well. And then, went to the, Cal Cities, the vote was the bylaws change, so it extended committee members from 11 to 13, but it added sort of the caucuses, the diversity caucus, to add membership into that executive committee, so it passed. And then it also passed, but we voted no, to move local control discussion back down to environmental committee, policy committees, and housing economic development committee. So they're going to review or hash out local control again and then bring it back up. And so if you recall, this last year, it was in housing and economic development. We made the recommendation for it to move forward, but the executive proposition to just put funding into, to really invest, put money into studying what it means and to move sort of language that would support more local control. But the committee, the resolutions committee, recommended it go back now to 2 committees, and then we'll just start over. So that's all I have. Bob?
I'll report out on the Cal Cities conference that I attended. I'll just comment on what got my attention related to diversity, equity, and inclusion and sustainability. I like to sometimes go to some of those little workshops that I don't generally attend, just to kind of get an understanding of what other people may be thinking or saying. And I find that often what is out there in the media is sometimes different than what actually goes on. So anyway, I will just say, when the discussion was related to diversity and equity, actually it was really just equity in this one and sustainability. They didn't talk about inclusion, and that's probably because it wasn't really on the agenda, but also I think that there is a fear on those who are kind of on the left side politically of having inclusion, because sometimes that means that they would have to listen to what people on the right side have to say, and so they don't really bring that up too much in the political discussions. However, when it came to equity and diversity, I was happy to learn that when they started talking about this in the context of what community development looks like, is that it was building and maintaining infrastructure, building and maintaining parks and having some green space, building trust and relationship with law enforcement. These are areas that the city of Clovis has always been focused on, that we've always been doing. I did not know that we were a DEI community, but apparently we are. It was so it was a little bit ironic that when they would talk about what they were talking about, they would say, we look at everything through the lens of equity. It's like two cities were saying, it's like this catchphrase. And then also what I learned is that if you put stuff like that in a grant application, you get money. So I think that we are, a DEI community, and we have the ability to get grants. I only say that half facetiously.
Half?
I was going to say half.
So there we go. That's my report out.
Sure. Do we have that photo for the young boy? You probably saw it in your Friday reports, but this young boy, Clovis Morales, French, from Paris, which would be a great sister city for us, by the way.
You're going to get
this is the kind of stuff that I wanted to get these small flags for this specific purpose, for the coins, because this is something that's going to be on his wall probably for the next 60 years. And I have gone to small towns in Germany and in Belgium, and they bring out, I have a briefcase, I have they hear pens and stuff like that, and they're really happy to do it. And when we can reciprocate in something like that, that made me smile. And
yeah, right. That is awesome, because that's true. See paintings of King Clovis in France at the Louvre.
Yeah. And Clovis is also a Paleolithic arrowhead kind of, they talk about the Clovis era. The Clovis culture. Yeah, and it has to do with to be the first with arrowheads. So.
That's in the Middle East?
No. No, Mid-America, yeah. And so,
the first Native American culture here.
So maybe our historical preservation will go a little even further than that.
We'll have to go visit Paris.
That's right. But I love things like this. And, this kid's going to be a happy camper, and at the story I'm sure that they probably do show and tell. And they come in and go, look where I went this summer. Yeah, that's right, exactly. That's all I have. And?
Just a couple things. I also went to the League. Didn't happen to go to the same session that Bob went to.
Oh, I gave you blow by blow.
I know, I didn't really need any more than I got. I found it marginally useful, but I haven't been in probably a decade, so it was good to see what was there. So I went to a couple of sessions. I went to the women's soccer coach. She was awesome. Wish we had a San Diego Wave soccer team in Fresno, or in Clovis, but she was interesting. And then the gal from the public policy Institute on Trends in California was interesting. So it was fine. Fine. Just two other items, or maybe three. Can you connect me with Alan Fry? I don't know how to get a hold of him, but I think a youth council is not a bad idea, and I think these boys and girls states kids might be kind of interesting way to engage, even just once a year or something. So maybe I can connect with Alan. I also wanted to share, I reported to staff, I think John hates it like on a Sunday when I'm out for a walk, because I send him things like, hey, John, and then I copy Andy, and they both hate me. But just for the record, that street, Santa Ana, between Armstrong and Gettysburg, basically, that I wrote to you about, a neighbor stopped me one day and said, could you do something about all these patches in the asphalt from, I guess, PG&E work mostly? And so the next time I was out, I said, of course I can. Of course Scott can. So the next day I was out for a walk, and I counted there were 58 patches in the asphalt on this pretty short street. So there's something about that that's just not quite right. So thanks for taking a look. I can now say that I've reported and we'll figure it out. But I thought 58, I really didn't expect to get to that big of a number, and it was really a short street. So anyway, thanks for working on that. And then on a more serious note, we haven't been together, but I watched the body cam from our PD on the event over by Santa Ana, I think the in custody dash claim. But what I wanted to say, and I sent a note to our chief, I was so impressed with our police officers in the most horrifying situation for anybody. I thought our team was so respectful and so calm. And I talked with the chief, and he called out an officer, Jocelyn Mahoney, and she was just so, I just thought she did everything to de-escalate. She sounded more like a nurse. Can I help you? It's going to be all right. So I was just in an era where people think that police are sort of out of control. I thought our team, in a really difficult circumstance, did a really good job. So I was very moved by watching the body cam for all the emotions that you would experience. So I just wanted to call them out, and Jocelyn and all the team. I didn't get all of their names, but it was really, I thought it was really the best of policing. So I'm not a police officer, obviously, but I thought it was really impressive. So anyway, that's all.
I have to report that I've been to 2 COG meetings that lasted less than 10 minutes. And it's just to do the COVID Brown Act thing, so we haven't had any real meetings. And what else have I done? And went to the 9/11 memorial, the California 9/11 memorial. They do an excellent job. I think the Cook family, when they took over that whole event, they continue to do honors to the memories of that event, and they put us on the map, and that's a great thing. That's all I have. And we'll go into a closed session, and I don't believe we'll have anything to report out after that closed session.
No, we're not asking for any action to report out.
Okay, thank you.